Chapter 783, Where the Domains. Chapter 783, Where the Domains. Shi Yang had never felt so fresh and powerful before. The King God realm in the Grace mainland was the highest existence. He had been on that continent for so long, but he had never seen anyone at the King God realm. Bao Ao, Jieji, Kunte, and even Xian Ming had tried for their whole life to reach the King God realm. However, due to the energy-draining situation in the Grace mainland, they were limited. Being unable to break through to this realm was the greatest regret of their lives. The time he had stayed in the raging flame star area wasn't too long. It was just 8 or 9 years. However, in this short period, he had ascended from the true God realm directly to the King God realm and created the God domains. And he got 3 marvelous God domains. Strolling through the extreme purgatory field, Shi Yang let all of his heaven flames fly back to the soul altar. He didn't need to be cautious anymore. He was so confident. He believed that in the extreme purgatory field now, only the third sky of King God realm warriors could trouble him. And even they wouldn't be able to kill him. Walking step by step, he immersed in the joy of the magical God domains. Never had he felt so happy before. From just a single thought, the God domain of the Dead Upanishad was activated. A 20-meter radius around Shi Yang was the maximum coverage of his dead domain. Big trees yellowed, flowers shriveled, and insects stopped crying. With another thought, the starry sea appeared. Magical starlight dots were created by his energy. They scattered beautifully and gloriously everywhere. His soul altar spun slightly and his space power had activated its God domain. A powerful energy that could control space was urged. Within 20 meters around him, the wind stopped, foliage froze, and even earth and heaven energy were restrained. It couldn't move anymore. The 3 powers Upanishad included death and life, star, and space would create the God domain as his God soul flickered. The 3 God domains had their own magical features. While moving, he tried them from time to time restlessly. Staying inside the God domain of the dead and life power Upanishad, Shi Yang could absorb the energy of living beings around him to strengthen himself. While the creatures themselves didn't notice, they had their soul energy taken out. The God domain created by Star Power Upanishad was a space full of stars. Under this starry dome, his star martial spirit became sensitive. As his soul flickered, he could immediately hide in any star. Within 20 meters, he could change his location, disappear and reappear in any starlight dots, giving them his magnificent powers to attack his enemies. The God domain created by space power wasn't as dangerous as the space slits when he broke through the new realm. Shi Yang understood that only a deeper understanding of space power Upanishad and the God domain could help him create the space slits that shielded him. When he gets to this point, he knew that no one would dare approach or ambush him. Space God domain had more magical features. Space of area that this God domain covering was restrained tightly. He only needed to urge his power and flicker a thought for all things inside his God domain, including air, energy, rock, and foliage to be imprisoned. Imprisonment was the basic specialty of Space Upanishad, one of the derived foundations of space power. He believed that in a battle with an opponent, urging his space power and creating the God domain would detain the other's body and soul in his space. Unless the other was prepared or had a force that was mighty enough to untie his bind, that warrior would simply be killed. Breaking through the King God realm had given him chances to create 3 God domains and enlarge his essence Chi ancient tree several times. Anyway, the benefits he had harvested weren't that simple. The God body is another advantage he got now. At this moment, the recovery ability of his immortal martial spirit had been upgraded. At the same time, his petrification martial spirit was also enhanced. His sturdy physique had reached a new level, which could be considered morbidly abnormal, under this great time of quenching by earth and heaven energy. He had tried and found that even the 3 bone thorns he had forged couldn't break the defense of his God body. He would need to use the maximum power to even pierce through his body. Ordinary King God realm warriors who dared to engage in close combat with him would be torn apart, leaving nothing, not even the bone dust. Due to his strong foundation and excellent body conditions, the God body he had condensed wasn't something ordinary King God realm warriors could compare to. He had a premonition that even the third sky of King God Realm warriors couldn't have a tough god body like his. As his power had been improved many times, his confidence was boosted. He believed that if he had had his today's realm in the solar star exploding fragment field that year, even if he didn't manipulate the flaming meteorites, he could have fought bloody slaughterer Ka-Tuor without much struggle. After his realm was upgraded, his vision widened, and he had a huge confidence boost. He decided not to hunt first sky of King God Realm warriors. His main targets were the prisoners and the villains at the second sky of King God Realm now. Once the Purgatory token had reported the living energy of second sky of King God Realm warriors, he would attack them proactively. This would help him accumulate immortal demon blood. Hovering above a lake in the extreme Purgatory field, Shi Yang's face was cold and harsh. A bloodthirsty gleam flashed in his eyes. While his thought flickered, so many stars twirled around his body, arraying a magical formation. Abruptly, he attacked someone in front of him. It was a Sea Clan brutal butcher at the second sky of King God Realm. They had fought for a half a day already. The other had thought that he had finally found a soft persimmon that he could squeeze to get a Purgatory token. Shortly, he knew he was wrong. Shi Yang wasn't a soft persimmon but a ferocious beast that didn't bare its fangs. The god domain of his star power was created. Shi Yang's figure flashed in the starlight. Sometimes he disappeared, leaving no aura. The brutal Sea Clan man had water power. He was unceasingly expanding his god domain. 10,000 tons of water in the lake rolled into the sky, morphing into rough dragons. They attacked Shi Yang furiously. Mwaha! Shi Yang sneered, waiting until the water dragons storming into his star god domain. He immediately created Space Power Upanishad, creating the god domain. Transparent water dragons storming toward him suddenly halted in the air. They froze bizarrely in front of him, unable to even wiggle. Disperse! Shi Yang pointed and a strange light shot out, hitting each water dragon. Furious sounds of water flowing echoed. Those water dragons had turned back into currents of water, falling into the lake underneath. His figure moved. The lake was still, the wind stopped moving, and energy was restrained where he hovered. Except him, anything in his god domain couldn't move. The Sea Clan warrior grimaced. The three god domains had almost collapsed his mentality. Every time he thought that he could do it, Shi Yang's god domain changed to another kind, which made all his attacks fail. On the still lake, Shi Yang sauntered. Suddenly, he roared like a savage beast, disappearing into the starlight. In the next moment, he reappeared next to that Sea Clan expert. He retrieved his god domain and bumped into the other with his physical strength. Boom! An earth-shaking explosion echoed from the transparent water barrier created by the Sea Clan expert. His crystal-clear defense shattered like pieces of jade. Water light shot out. Shi Yang laughed louder, marching toward that warrior, engaging in a battle inside his god domain. He bombarded him with star power. Stars spun and shot towards him. The power of his body continued expanding endlessly. Light spots that scattered from the shattered crystal wall fiercely pierced his god body. However, they couldn't damage him. Space imprisonment. While he was battling enthusiastically, Shi Yang suddenly let out a low shout. The man in his god domain halted as if he was tied by so many ropes in the air. He didn't even move. Shi Yang smiled while walking toward him. He patted the man's head. His big head exploded. Blood and brain scattered. Retrieving his god domain and taking in almost all of the essence chi in that dead man's body, Shi Yang grinned before standing up. Half a year had passed unknowingly. Shi Yang became a god of slaughter in the extreme Purgatory field. Wherever he passed through, any villains he could sense had become a source of his immortal demon blood. During this period, he had accumulated experiences in using the god domains through many battles. His understanding of the three god domains gradually became profound. After each battle, he would quiet down and review to find the advantages and disadvantages of the god domains. In the next battle, he would try to minimize the disadvantages and promote the intimidating features of his god domains. After half a year of battling, he became fluent in using god domains. He didn't feel shaky when combining the power of the three powers. He gradually started to understand the secret of coordinating the three powers to reach its most powerful potential. Among the prisoners and villains he had killed, not only the first sky of King Godrealm, at least 10 second sky of King Godrealm prisoners were erased. The number of immortal demon blood he had accumulated was almost 1,000 drops. He used the immortal demon blood to replace his own blood. In his eyes, this event was getting closer. He thought that if he had enough time and the number of brutal persons in the extreme purgatory field was adequate, perhaps he could finish his blood replacement here. The vast extreme purgatory field was worth the most magical place in the entire raging flamestar area. In this place, his perception of powers Upanishad had become much sensitive. After each battle, he always had a new harvest. His perception and understanding of the three power Upanishads had increased every day. Today, while he was searching his praise, he met his acquaintances, Yalan and Taimu. Their situation was apparently not good. They had wounds all over their bodies. They were distressed as if they were trying to run away from someone. They were moving towards him. Shi Yang was surprised. Chapter 784, The Cunning Old Fellow. Chapter 784, The Cunning Old Fellow. Yalan and Taimu were both at the second sky of King Godrealm. They had followed Carthew for many years, so they must have various fighting experiences. Who could make them run with such haste like this? Stop! Shi Yang suddenly shouted. Yalan and Taimu didn't stop. In fact, upon seeing him, they started to attack. Yalan cultivated the earth power Upanishad. As soon as she activated her god domain, the land in her area suddenly twirled. Boundless earth energy immediately turned into a mist of dust, snatching over Shi Yang. Taimu didn't hesitate. Gusts flew around his body. The wind blades sparkled like shining knives, cutting hundreds of trees around him into pieces. Since they had been together for a while in the gravitational room, Shi Yang understood their powers Upanishad well. They were using wind and earth powers Upanishad. Once they urged the god domains, they could cooperate well, which made people not be able to fly to the sky or to get underground seeking escape. This is also why Carthew let them two enter the extreme purgatory field together. The two powers Upanishad exploded together. The grey dust rolled on the ground, working with the tornadoes in the air, covering Shi Yang's instantly. Shi Yang's consciousness was affected badly. Staying in that grey area, he couldn't locate their positions. Energy tornadoes were marching furiously, uprooting the giant trees. Such energy movement was strong enough to cut his body into small pieces. It was different from the prisoners Shi Yang had encountered. Yalan and Taimu's forces were tremendous individuals, as their understanding of earth and heaven powers were more profound. Their god domains had coordinated their attack together. After Shi Yang got covered, he couldn't get rid of it. The tornado rolled his body into the air, spinning it. Shi Yang felt dizzy immediately. Yalan and Taimu were the experienced warriors with long battling times in outer space. They had so many divine pellets. They trained their bodies marvelously while also using their wonderful powers Upanishad. As Shi Yang stayed in their god domains, he had to be very careful. He immediately released his space god domain. Shortly, the energies of earth and tornado were frozen for 3 seconds. But he could hold them only for 3 seconds. After 3 seconds, their two powers got rid of his constraint and moved towards him again. However, 3 seconds to the King God Realm warriors like Shi Yang were more than enough. Especially in fighting, it was enough for him to do many things. He escaped Yalan and Taimu's god domain, approaching them shortly. He shouted angrily, "What the heck are you doing?" While shouting at him, he accumulated the energy of his god body. Special powers of his twirled around him. Starlight spots as brilliant as diamond scattered around him thickly. Star Upanishad! Taimu screamed in astonishment. He suddenly woke up, shouting, "Yalan, his real." Yalan was startled. She scrutinized Shi Yang and then said, "In the gravitational field, you and I talked. How many siblings do I have?" "An older brother and a younger sister." Shi Yang frowned skeptically. "What did you ask that for?" Yalan calmed down, exhaling in relief. "So you're real." Taimu looked like he had finally put the burden aside. He panted. I thought it came again. F***ck it. That freak has almost made me collapse mentally. So many illusions. I can't help it anymore. I can't differentiate reality from an illusion. Shi Yang was surprised. What did you encounter? The two retrieved their powers. The god domains disappeared. The area became calm again. You've broken through? Taimu's eyes were sharp, screaming with astonishment. You've broken through in this extreme purgatory field? Yalan was frightened. She continued shouting monster. Frowning, Shi Yang expressed his impatience. True. I've broken through, but it doesn't matter right now. Tell me what happened. What did you do? Why did you need to hide? Who in this extreme purgatory field could put you into such a disordered state? Aojera's team or Madame Leona's team? None of them. Yalan and Taimu forced a smile. Those prisoners. They besieged you? Shi Yang was surprised, asking disbelievingly. Although they aren't weak, you guys are experienced warriors who have been through perilous training. What happened? An old fellow at the third sky of King God Realm. He cultivates a peculiar power Upanishad that could create illusions. People, scenes, rocks, rivers, mountains, he can create everything you can name, just like a real world. Taimu was still scared. In his illusions, we were attacked by so many friends and even Sir Carthew. We almost got killed. Then, when we diverged, we would meet the illusion of each other. We would be ambushed wickedly. We are exhausted. He has been chasing us this entire time. Yalan felt helpless. Although the warriors in the extreme purgatory field are all at the King God Realm, we aren't afraid of them when we join hands. However, that man has a special power. Until now, we haven't seen his real face. We only heard his sinister laughter. Shi Yang couldn't help but be stern. Third sky of King God Realm? He knows how to create illusionary worlds and creatures. You guys couldn't use the soul consciousness to detect it. Our realm is lower than his. We can't break the illusion. The illusionary characters he created also have living energy fluctuations. We can't say if it's real or not. Taimu shook his head, unable to avoid a headache. Anyway, his power Upanishad's lethality isn't good. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived until now. However, after getting deceived so many times, we're exhausted. Seems like your trouble isn't small, Shi Yang contemplated and then smiled. If we meet him, just join hands. Is that old man still here? Then, his soul consciousness checked the purgatory token on his waist. Shi Yang sensed carefully for a while, but he didn't find any beam of living energy. He relaxed his vigilance. I'm sure he is around here. This cunning old fellow is like a resentful ghost that will never disperse. He hasn't left yet. OF***CK. He has targeted us for our purgatory token. It would help him survive. Taimu cursed, facing the sky and yelling indignantly. Hey F***king bastard, if you have the guts, come here and fight. What is interesting about your stealthy operations? Hee. I like to hide the head and show the tail. I don't dare meet people. You guys should show mercy to me. A voice floated in the vast forest like a wind they couldn't catch or locate. Interesting. Another prey at the first sky of King God Realm. Hee. I'm even more certain now that I could get out of this damn place. The sound of the voice wound around many times, sounding close occasionally and far away at other times. Shi Yang changed his visage. He sensed the purgatory token the second time. His face darkened as he muttered. He can avoid the purgatory token's sensing? Taimu and Yalan nodded miserably. How could he do that? Shi Yang was baffled. My purgatory token has never failed in the extreme purgatory field. It's obvious that the old man's around, but we can't detect his living trace. We don't know. This is his dangerous feature. With the purgatory token, we would be the hunters. But now, he knows where we are but we can't detect him. We are under the light while he stays in the dark. We've become his prey. Yalan frowned and pulled her hair. This cunning old man is familiar with the extreme purgatory field. Seems like he hasn't been here only once. He can use his understanding of the topography and the special situation of each location to create illusions. If he didn't understand the terrain here like it was the back of his hand, he couldn't be so subtle. Little girl, you're right. Until today, I've been participating in the extreme purgatory field 5 times. I've been the prey every time. However, I've been living for well over 250 years. He, the extreme purgatory field is a good place. If I haven't reached the bottleneck of my realm and I can't make a good use of the conditions here, I wouldn't have to leave urgently. Perhaps I could give you a chance to live. The inwardly evil-hearted ridicule arose timely as if he was about to ambush. No matter how much they lowered their voices, he could still hear them clearly. What he had said paled Shi Yang, Yalan, and Tai Mu. Participating in the extreme purgatory field 5 times meant that he has been in the extreme purgatory field for at least 250 years. He was a condemned to death felon 200 years ago. As he was able to withstand the extreme purgatory field 5 times, he was definitely a tough character. According to him, if he hadn't reached the bottleneck of the peak of the King God realm, he would stay for more. With such a character watching them and their purgatory token, Yalan and Tai Mu didn't know what to say. They could only blame their bad luck. In fact, I'm a nice guy. Actually, I don't need your lives. If you guys give me a purgatory token, I won't continue watching you guys anymore. How does it sound? The old man giggled in the dark, talking sinisterly. Your little buddy at the first sky of King God realm is the weakest. It should be easy to kill him, right? Okay. Kill him and you will have an extra purgatory token to give to me. I'll let you guys go. What do you think? This old fellow said he was cunning and wicked enough to attempt to tear apart the relationship between Shi Yang and the other two. Hearing his words, Yalan and Tai Mu became silent. Their eyes sparkled strangely. Shi Yang shuddered inwardly. He couldn't help but snort. He looked at the two coldly and frowned, waiting for their decision. There are no friends in the extreme purgatory field. Except for oneself, one shouldn't trust anyone else. This is what Yalan and Tai Mu had taught him before. Today, what they taught finally surfaced. Chapter 785, Thousand Fantasy Fields Domain. Chapter 785, Thousand Fantasy Fields Domain. Outside the extreme purgatory field, Du Tianle and the 5 great feudal vassals were frowning as they had no idea what was happening in the crystal mirror lake. A corner of the lake was covered by grey mist which concealed everything. Shi Yang, Yalan, and Tai Mu were there. Carthew's face darkened. The light sparkling in his eyes showed his fright. He turned and shouted at Du Tianle, "What is happening? The last time I saw my 2 soldiers was 3 days ago. Where did that grey mist come from? Why does it hinder our view?" Du Tianle frowned as he couldn't explain, either. "I'm not sure. Perhaps someone who knows the mysteries of the extreme purgatory field has blocked the view from the outside, preventing us from seeing what is happening there." "Who is that?" Carthew snorted. "How are my 2 troopers?" Shaking his head, Du Tianle answered begrudgingly, "I don't know, either. I'm not the ones who designed this extreme purgatory field. It is a mysterious natural formation that is intertwined with the will of earth and heaven. Before our king was throned, the extreme purgatory field had existed. It is the most magical area of our divine nation. I don't wish to learn all of its mysteries. There is trouble now. Shi Yang is also there and we don't know what is going on." Rochester spread his arms and shrugged. "I'm interested in this boy the most. But now, I can't see anything. It has become too boring. Yalan and Tai Mu would soon face Shi Yang. I don't know what would happen between them." Da Lei chuckled. Although Yalan and Tai Mu weren't ordinary, Shi Yang has reached the King God realm. During this time, he has killed many warriors within the same realm. "I'm really curious." Carthew's face grimaced. Of course, he knew that Shi Yang was tough. They had been watching Shi Yang the whole time. They paid attention to each of his battles. They noticed that the way he used energy and his domains were getting more profound day by day. They weren't surprised anymore seeing Shi Yang fight warriors whose realm was higher than his. None of the normal warriors at the second sky of King God realm could flee from his hunt. After half a year, At least 10 warriors had died in his hands. While they hadn't noticed, the number of prisoners Shi Yang had killed had surpassed the records of Da Lei, Yalan, and Tai Mu, and the 2 warriors under Rochester's command. His record was just a bit fewer than Leona's team and Ao Jera's team. According to the current situation, it would not be long before Shi Yang's record surpassed Ao Jera's. In the most critical time, Shi Yang, Yalan, and Tai Mu were all covered in the thick grey mist. As they couldn't see what was happening inside, everybody was irritated. Seems like someone is very familiar with the extreme purgatory field. He can affect the energy moving inside and stay hidden from our view. This one is experienced and cunning. I think he will have a close fight against Shi Yang soon, said Leona, frowning. Everybody was curious. They concentrated and gazed at the lake down there, but they couldn't see anything. Besides them, the master of the divine nation in the dark firmament star also frowned, his face cold and harsh. Father, what is happening? Why can't you see? Zi Yarrow was surprised. When the extreme purgatory field opened, wasn't it under your control? Du Tianji's eyes sparkled with a strange light. He contemplated for a while before saying slowly, I know how to open it, but I did not make it. When I got the divine nation that year, the extreme purgatory field had already existed. It has been there for tens of thousands of years. An imperial master of our divine nation had used the wonderful natural formation of the extreme purgatory field to make it. The mysteries in that formation are the most subtle and magnificent ones. I'm not good at this evil stuff. Of course, I don't know all of its mysteries. Imperial Master? Zi Yarrow was shaken. The divine nation hasn't had an imperial master for quite a long time. It's true. The imperial master position has been vacant for so many years. I wanted to offer him that position, but he rejected it. A bit of loss sparkled in Du Tianji's eyes. Zi Yarrow knew who he was talking about. The old man secluding in the solar star exploding fragment field was one of the top alchemists in the raging flame star area. Several hundred years ago, he was famous in this star area. The previous imperial masters of our divine nations were all famous. They had deep understanding of the nature of power's Upanishad. Our source of power Upanishad inheritance was created by them. Unfortunately, there hasn't been an imperial master for several monarchies before my reign. Also, no one is qualified enough to hold this position. Du Tianji sighed. Usually, the imperial master will be in charge of the extreme purgatory field. But we don't have a suitable candidate, so I have to take charge myself. However, I've dedicated my life to the acme of power, so I didn't study about the heaven way evil techniques. My understanding of the extreme purgatory field isn't deep enough, so. You don't know the reasons why? Yes. This limitless divine mirror of mine was made by the last imperial master of our divine nation. If it couldn't reflect the real situation of the extreme purgatory field there, I have no other alternative. What are the requirements to become the imperial master? Top-grade blacksmith and alchemist. He must acquire a firm grasp of natural formations, understand the nature of powers, be able to refine and force divine-grade pellets and tools. He must also be able to carve formations, barriers, and restrictions. And achieve the best merit for the divine nation. Oh, Shi Yang's a blacksmith, too. Blacksmith? Du Tianji burst out laughing, shaking his head. This kid cultivates mixed powers indeed. He is greedy enough to have a bit of everything. Perhaps he is just an amateur blacksmith without a significant attainment. He can forge divine-grade tools. Divine-grade? Du Tianji was surprised. He couldn't help but shout, how could it be? I saw it with my own eyes. Du Tianji's face changed. He got startled and expression was odd. Dash. Extreme purgatory field. The cunning, old man was still trying to drive a wedge between Shi Yang and the other two. You know, I'm only one person here, so I need only one token. Even if I had more, it would be useless. I just want to get out of here alive. I don't want to be imprisoned in the extreme purgatory field. Our deal is quite simple. You kill that boy and give me his purgatory token. I will leave you alone. Simple, eh? He buzzed non-stop like a fly trying to manipulate Tai Mu and Yalan. You two are the second sky of King Godrealm warriors and you coordinate well. If I have to kill you, I have to use a lot of my energy. Perhaps I can be hurt. But he is different. He has only the first sky of King Godrealm cultivation base, and he has broken through just recently. If you kill him for me, I don't need to use my powers and you can get rid of me. We all end up happy. What do you think? That old fellow used cruel and sinister words which had poked right at their weakest nerves. His plan seemed to work. Yalan and Tai Mu looked touched, their faces uncertain. Shi Yang was calm but he was on guard. Actually, he didn't have a deep relationship with Tai Mu and Yalan. They had only met several times and talked a bit in the gravitational fields. This kind of relationship had no foundation. If they want to kill him to save their lives, Shi Yang thought it would be possible. He stood and squinted. All of a sudden, he sat down quietly right in front of Yalan and Tai Mu. He stooped, breathing regularly as if he was musing on something. Yalan and Tai Mu looked at him with confused and uncertain faces. The seducing voice of the cunning fellow continued to attack at their weakest points. Shi Yang didn't say anything. He closed his eyes like he was sleeping. He looked defenseless. His aura was retrieved. Yalan and Tai Mu's minds struggled for a while. They exchanged looks like they had finally made up their minds. They sat down cross-legged like Shi Yang had done and steadied their affected mind. Slowly, they pulled themselves together. Damn you, you mean and shameless bastard. I almost got tricked. Tai Mu was foul-mouthed. Come if you do have power. Come kill the three of us. You mother-asterisk-ker, stop using your tricks. Shi Yang waited in silence with closed eyes. He grinned and he relaxed his tense nerves. Brilliant starlight spots appeared gloriously in the area of 20 meters around Shi Yang. The lights were blinding as the stars spun mysteriously around him. Yalan and Tai Mu maintained a safe distance from Shi Yang. They all released the god domains. They formed a triangle but their god domain didn't overlap. All were waiting in silence. If you really want to court death, don't blame me. Sigh, too stupid. It's obviously an easy choice. Why do you make it more complicated like this? The floating voice of the old man swayed. Sometimes it was near them, and the other times it was far away. At the moment his voice arose, grey mist overflowed quietly. They covered the three of them instantly. Their god domains had no strange reactions or detected any unique energy fluctuation. It seemed this grey mist was just a normal cloud without any magical effects. However, the soul altars of Shi Yang's group were tense right after that grey mist engulfed them. It was like that mist had carried along some unknown dangers. Their soul altars suddenly shook. Shi Yang's god soul trembled while his face changed. He opened his eyes all of a sudden. Shadows started to appear next to him. Those silhouettes sat on the ground. They were Yalan, Tai Mu, and Shi Yang himself. Even the god domains looked alike. The one sitting on his left looked identical to him. That Shi Yang opened his eyes, looking around with astonishment. His bearings were exactly the same as Shi Yang's, giving him an illusion of watching himself in the mirror. Just like that figure, sitting not far from him were more than 10 Yalan and Tai Mu. All of them had clear living energy fluctuations. The purgatory token on his waist all of a sudden signaled countless of lives. When Shi Yang looked at that man, the man was looking back at him, too. While Shi Yang was perplexed, an evil smile beamed on the face that was identical to his. Shi Yang shouted inwardly. He didn't think much but changed his god domain to the space-restraining domain. Chapter 786. Break the Illusions. Chapter 786. Break the Illusions. Space power blockade. The whole world was suddenly silent. No wind. No sound. All the energies seemed to have simultaneously force quit. Everything stopped all of a sudden. The man that looked exactly like Shi Yang had his eccentric smile frozen. More than 10 Yalan and Tai Mu around Shi Yang halted, their face frozen in place. Shi Yang extended his arm. A divine light dot departed from his fingertip, dashing like the lightning towards that man. Tut! His body exploded, turning into grey mist. A wisp of soul consciousness twisted, flashed from his body before disappeared. Boom, boom, boom. His finger pointed on the youths sitting near him. They perished one by one, releasing a beam of soul remnant. Farther from him were the illusions of Taimu and Yalan. Shi Yang didn't dare act rashly. Each of the illusionary bodies had the living energy fluctuations, and his purgatory token had reflected their living signals. Shi Yang couldn't tell who was real and who were the replicas. As he couldn't tell which one was real, Shi Yang didn't dare act recklessly as he was afraid of hurting Yalan's and Taimu's real bodies. Space power. A sharp voice arose in the forest nearby. The cunning old fellow seemed to be scared. He screamed darkly. It has been so many years since I've seen someone using space power Upanishad. You're rare, really rare. I want to see if the space power Upanishad can break my 1,000 fantasy fields domain or not. When his voice stopped, shadows started to ooze out from nowhere, floating like ghosts that couldn't be caught. They all dashed toward Shi Yang. Even though the shadows hadn't come close to him yet, the area that Shi Yang's space domain covered suddenly had a tremendous change. Instantly, Shi Yang couldn't see Taimu and Yalan anymore. He was standing on a small, isolated island. This island had some barren mountains. Rolling waves from the ocean lapped the shore. Shi Yang could even hear the sound of waves and seawater moving. The shadows had disappeared, becoming part of his surroundings that his soul consciousness couldn't sense anymore. Taimu and Yalan weren't in this illusion. They were forced to move somewhere else. Shi Yang's purgatory token couldn't detect them. That old cunning man understood the purgatory token's features well. His 1,000 fantasy fields domain would counter the ability to sense living beings of the purgatory token. He wasn't going to let Shi Yang have any assistance. Understanding this anomaly, Shi Yang didn't hesitate to take back the wisp of soul consciousness he had sent into the purgatory token. He didn't need its help anymore. The other's domain was peculiar and wicked as it could affect God's souls and sea of consciousness. Under such circumstance, Shi Yang didn't release the soul consciousness anymore. Any creatures that appeared in this place would be treated as his enemies. The surroundings changed again. Gradually, flowers bloomed on this island. Each of them was so beautiful and fresh. Stars blinked in the night. Luxuriant, green foliage appeared. The small, cold island suddenly revived vigorously and brought people. Seeing this vibrant scene, Shi Yang didn't feel comfortable. He vaguely felt like an invisible danger was creeping towards him, a danger that could attack him in any minute. A feeble wisp of energy fluctuation that was hard to detect flashed in the illusion. Shortly, flowers and floras on the island flew out as if they were just given powers. Strong energy fluctuations attacked. Billions of tons of seawater condensed into different kinds of sea monsters, bearing fangs and claw, roaring crazily on their way. Shi Yang's space domain couldn't stop them. Those floras and the sea monsters seemed to have a long time growing in his space power and got used to its features. When they attacked him, his space domain could not seal them. Shi Yang understood that all that he saw were just hollow images, so his space power couldn't constrain them. However, the energy stored in them was real, which was the condensed energy of a king god realm warrior. If Shi Yang were careless, this kind of power could hurt him or even kill him on the spot. Seeing the danger coming, Shi Yang was as calm as usual. His soul altar spun a little bit and his god domain changed. Countless stars appeared like precious gemstones. Shi Yang looked like he was immersing in the sea of gems. Light shone gloriously around him. Star power Upanishad was activated. Stars around him started to revolve fast. Shi Yang put himself in the star sea flying as he pleased. His body flashed and arrived at different stars in just a blink. No one could detect his whereabouts. So many perilous attacks swarmed over him, but they could neither find nor lock Shi Yang in the sea star. At the same time, the starry sea started to wear out their energy. Another god domain. The old man's voice reverberated in the air. Apparently, he was startled. His voice trembled. In the center of his echo, a flood created by fierce energy stormed towards the center of the star sea. Boom! Shi Yang's god domain seemed to take a formidable hit. The space of 10 meters around him shattered. Broken stars fell. The energy of his star power Upanishad was in disorder. All illusions vanished. Their energy fused into one big flow, turning into the furious flood current with a face that looked exactly like his. It snatched down from the sky and was about to swallow Shiyang. The island broke. Seawater ran fiercely, flooding the island. This fatal scene looked like the doomsday was coming. Shiyang felt his soul trembling seeing this. Death seal. His god domain changed again. Massive seals condensed in the sky. His dead Upanishad covered the whole area. The dead seal stamped the air. Shortly, Shiyang was surrounded with numerous dead seal, covering the entire area. His negative energy crazily poured into the domain. His god body was swollen. Energy flowed massively in his vessels unceasingly. Brutal energy gushed out from him, making each dead seal as big as a small mountain. They bombarded everything he saw. Wicked dead Upanishad spread out, restraining all of the oncoming attacks. At this moment, his quick life Upanishad found a strange beam of living being energy undersea. Gotcha. Shiyang showed a faint smile, his face still stern. Big dead seals gathered and combined, making a giant hand that could even cover the whole sky. That hand then furiously pounded the sea bottom. Just like a breaking mirror, countless fragments of the illusions scattered under this attack. Shiyang's surroundings became normal. Yalan and Tai Mu were fighting with their own illusions near him. The illusions entangling them also had vitality and energy fluctuations. However, as Shiyang maintained his god domain in the mode of dead and life intent domain, all living energy fluctuations of creatures in his domain were amplified and became clearer. Shiyang couldn't see the difference between Yalan, Tai Mu, and their replicas, but in his god domain, the living fluctuations of the illusions weren't as clear as theirs. It was enough for him. He could find their real bodies now. A deep hole appeared near him which was created by the bombarding of his dead seals. Immense grey mist diffused from that hole. A skinny, rickety figure appeared in that grey mist. It was a sloppy, dirty old man with disheveled hairs and scabs. He was wearing a muddy, long grey robe. His face was also covered in dust, but his eyes were sparkling and fiery. 3 powers Upanishad. 3 different god domains. Boy, how did you do that? Using 3 powers alternatively to break my 1000 fantasy fields domain, I can't deny that I surrendered. I really want to know how you could create 3 god domains at the same time. The skinny old man floated in the grey mist like a wandering ghost. He looked at Shiyang with a dark, gloomy gaze. I don't know. I've just created them not long ago. During the battle with you, I got to know how to shift between them subtly. Indeed, magical things could happen. Shiyang was indifferent. If you want to use the 1000 fantasy fields domain to delude me, I don't think it will be easy anymore. I can distinguish any creature in my domain to see if they are real or not. Evil power Upanishad, the old man mumbled then snorted. Don't think that breaking my 1000 fantasy fields domain means you won. Since you have only the first sky of King God Realm cultivation base, I can defeat you using only my power and my god body. The reason why I didn't show up is that I wanted to save energy. But if you break my god domain, I have no choice but to widen your knowledge. Let's see how vast the gap between my 3rd sky cultivation base and your 1st sky cultivation base is. He attacked immediately. Shiyang became serious. He didn't wait until the old man struck his first attack. A thought arose and the crazy hissing echoed. 3 bone thorns were invisible, leaving only the ear-piercing whistle in the air. They were moving across spaces, gathering energy. The old man suddenly became alert. He slightly discolored and squinted as if he was trying to detect the source of the sound. Shiyang immediately entered the rampage realm. Shiyang's eyes turned blood red as negative energy gushed out from his body. Pallid tentacles extended from each of his acupuncture points. This was the first time he urged the rampage realm after entering the King God realm. His refined body looked like iron or jade shriveled at the moment energy was accumulated. Scarlet halo bloomed from his body and reflected in his eyes, making him look more eccentric and evil. Bloodthirsty, wild energy erupted like a volcano from his god body before fusing with his magical dead intent domain. The coverage of the soul burial ground was tripled, reaching an astonishing 30 meters. Desperation, bloodthirstiness, resentment, and other negative feelings multiplied. The ability to steal life force increased strongly. In this moment, Shi Yang looked like a demon that crept out from the bottom layer of hell. His body diffused the aura of termination. His existence seemed to destroy all creatures in the world. 8 chapters for today. Happy now? Chapter 787, Counterattack. Chapter 787, Counterattack. After breaking through to the King God realm, this was the first time Shi Yang had used all of his powers. In his previous dozens of battles, he had encountered some second sky of King God realm warriors. However, such characters couldn't stimulate all of his powers. Shi Yang didn't use much energy to kill them. Only this old man with his third sky of King God realm and the eccentric power Upanishad had made him use the Rampage realm, which had taken all of his energy. Standing on the freezing ground, Shi Yang squinted. His blood-red eyes were sharp and cold like sabers that gazed at that old fellow. The hissing of the 3 bone thorns was like a crying ghost which irritated people. The bone thorns with space power could be invisible and didn't even have shadows. It was hard to locate or lock them down using soul consciousness. Although he was at the third sky of King God realm, in the horrifying buzzing, he had no other way around but spending a part of his energy to stay cautious, preventing the 3 bone thorns. Inner fantasy thousand-folds. The old man lowered his voice and shouted. His shriveled body leaped up all of a sudden. Then, the senile man turned into a 10-meter-tall giant. His skinny body swelled as if it contained endless power. He faced the sky, and roared while swinging his arm. With the sound of bone exploding, a palm pressed down from the sky, snatching Shi Yang, covering all of the area where he was standing. Refined energy compacted in his palm like so many electric god dragons, creating the whole new world in that instant. Shi Yang looked at the sky. He saw many shadows in that giant palm. They were Shi Jian, Shi Tai, Yang Tian Emperor, Yi Tian Mo, Xia Xin Yang, He Qing Man, and Bing Qing Tong's sisters. In that palm were all the people Shi Yang cared about. At this moment, they became his archenemies. They were storming towards him with cold and sinister faces. Each of his loved ones became the killer who wanted to take his life. Energy revolved everywhere, swarming toward Shi Yang. His soul altar was affected. His god soul was enchanted. Sorrow, disappointment, and deep bitterness arose in his heart. While he was puzzled, those people became the real death which wanted to kill him. Heart delusion technique. This was the bizarre and evil feature of the old man's power Upanishad. It could affect people's hearts, delude their minds, and make them believe that all that they saw were true. Seeing his family members and friends want to take his life, Shi Yang, this cold and harsh person, felt lost. His heart made him restrain his enormous energy as he was afraid that he could hurt his loved ones. You've forgotten us and you just want to live your good life, don't you? Why haven't you returned yet? Don't you know that we are struggling in the dead puddle of the Grace mainland because of energy shortage? Now that you have a good life, do you remember us? You forgot us, didn't you? His family members and friends threw question after question at him which messed his mind up more. Shi Yang was baffled and didn't know how to answer them. His mind was chaotic. His will was reduced. He couldn't release all of his powers. At this moment, Shi Yang fell under such struggling circumstances. The giant body that the old man had created beamed a sinister smile while his other hand also pressed down. He performed the other magical illusions a second time, which was to deceive people's hearts. Those silhouettes stormed over, bombarding their attacks on him. Each figure had turned into a sharp attack with pure energy. All fell on Shi Yang. Boom, boom, boom. Shi Yang's upright body was hit hard, settling down to dozens of meters underground. A massive hole appeared right where he had just stood. Illusions disappeared. Shi Yang was kneeling inside a 100-meter-large hole. Blood covered his entire body. His bones cracked and so did his eyes. He woke up immediately. Intensive pains spread across his body while his energy was chaotic. Forces in his body shot like lightning. All had lost its balance. The struggling Shi Yang thought that if he died, he would feel better. The circulation of his energy and power was stagnant. The giant body of the old man stood vigorously. He stooped and watched Shi Yang in his 100-meter deep hole. He was surprised. "Kid, your god body isn't broken yet." With his third sky of King God Realm cultivation base, the first sky of King God Realm warrior's body couldn't bear much of his attacks. It would explode and only the soul altar could escape. He thought that Shi Yang must be dead under his savage attack. Unfortunately, he had underestimated the toughness of Shi Yang's god body. His attack had just hurt Shi Yang badly, and it couldn't explode his body. "Hey old freak, I won't let you live so comfortably." Shi Yang had blood all over his face. Blood also trickled from the corners of his eyes. He looked brutally angry. "I hate family members and friends' illusions the most. Since you're so shameless and sinister, don't blame me for giving you the same treatment." Then, Shi Yang shot out of the hole like a sharp sword. His god domain was filled with negative feelings like death, desperation, resentment, bloodthirstiness, and more. They condensed into a torrential sea of negative energy. Just like the beast getting out of its reign, it flooded over the old man like a Milky Way, covering his entire area. Not only did the old man know how to delude people with illusions. In his god domain, Shi Yang knew how to use the same mysterious trick. Filled with resentment, Shi Yang's god soul manipulated the 3 bone thorns and got them out of the space slits. As soon as they appeared, the 3 bone thorns aimed at the old man's eyes and nape, stabbing directly like 3 silver lightning strikes. The old man discolored. He didn't expect that the bone thorns could have space power and be so cunning. He urged his energy, creating moving halo covering his body. Those moving halos looked like small fish swimming around him. When the 3 bone thorns arrived, the halo entangled them all. Shi Yang's bone thorns looked like they were tied by something invisible, sinking into a swamp. The bone thorns Shi Yang had refined himself were made of a bone of a level 11 beast with more than 10 auxiliary materials, which greatly enhanced their hardness and sharpness. This weapon of his had reached rank 1 divine grade. Although it was the defense of a third sky of King God Realm warrior, hurriedly countering the 3 bone thorns had used all of his power. While the old man used his energy to create the moving halos that prevented the 3 bone thorns, he didn't have extra energy to create more illusions. Shortly after, all illusions that were affecting Shi Yang, Tai Mu, and Yalan vanished. Shi Yang used his negative feelings to create the negative sea engulf the old man. He didn't hesitate and clapped his hands in front of his chest. Lights congregated between his palms, creating a big light sword. Shi Yang slashed his sword, fiercely stabbing through the negative sea and aiming at the old man's glabella. At the same time, Yalan and Tai Mu released their god domains after they had got rid of the illusions. Tornadoes swept around. Earth changed. Beams of furious energy fell on the sky like shooting light from outer space. They all aimed at the old man. The 3 bone thorns struggled to move due to the moving halos. As if they had consciousness, they retreated and disappeared into folds of space. At this moment, the negative sea, which was filled with evil and wicked negative emotions, had engulfed the old man. Although he was good at deluding people, the old man was affected. He seemed to be dragged into hell. What he saw were all the bloody ghosts and demons that surrounded him. His god soul was affected so that he wouldn't be able to create the illusions in just a short period. Right at this moment, the light sword slashed down. This sword made the old man stop making illusions and to focus on gathering energy to create the moving halos around his body for defense. The light sword slashed down grumblingly. Light shot out everywhere. The beams of light that had created the divine sword flew out, shifting into tens of thousands of stars that darted towards him. Twirling gusts wreaked havoc everywhere, covering the old man. Under his feet, a heavy restraining force pressed the old man down on the ground, keeping him from flying away. Yalan and Tai Mu were both the second sky of King God Realm warriors. As they were the troopers under Carthew's command, they had enough fighting experience. They were good at continuous attacking. After they got rid of the illusions, they immediately released their powers. The intimidating scene they created was not less than Shi Yang's. Swoosh! A wisp of divine light appeared. Shi Yang walked to that old man. His soul flickered and the god domain changed again. Both of his hands joined together, and a magical effect was created. He held the space domain tightly in his palms, making an incomparable space mystery. Massive light balls bombarded the old man instantly. Space imprisonment, Shi Yang shouted. Crack, crack, crack. Cracking sounds echoed from the space where the old man stood. It seemed that everything there was imprisoned. However, wind and earth power Upanishads of Yalan and Tai Mu were exceptions. They were still flowing furiously. The old man's body stopped moving. Countless moving lights around him were frozen eccentrically. Yalan and Tai Mu's powers hit him immediately. Explosions continued. Light sparks shot out from the old man's god body. Shortly after, that old man looked like Shi Yang with blood covering him entirely, as if hundreds of sabers and swords had slashed him. He was in utter confusion with disheveled hair, giving him a funny and pitiful look. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The hissing sound of the bone thorns arose again. The 3 bone thorns appeared, stabbing his chest and back. Pfff. The bone thorns pierced the old man's god body. Bones cracked. The old man spat out blood. However, his face glowed strangely. He then disappeared like a ghost, leaving no trace. All of his aura, energy fluctuations, and life magnetic field were gone. No one could detect him. Yalan and Tai Mu walked over after the old man disappeared. They frowned while searching, touching their purgatory token to see if they could sense something. 8 chapters for today. Happy now? Chapter 788. Break into the prohibited area. Chapter 788. Break into the prohibited area. I sense living energy fluctuations in 5 different directions. Yalan stroked the purgatory token, frowning while scanning everything around her. She talked with a slight headache. Tai Mu scowled and had a worried look. I don't know how this old freak affected the purgatory token to deceive us. His aura currently signals in 5 different directions. I don't know which way we will find him. Shi Yang walked over to them. Blood dripped from his body. He wiped away a trickle of blood on the corner of his mouth, smiling coldly. The signals in all 5 directions are all fake. This old freak is really cunning. Yalan and Tai Mu couldn't help but stare at him for a few seconds. Later on, Yalan said, "You are truly fierce. You have become so mighty after breaking through to the King God realm." In the previous battle, Shi Yang was the main force as his power had stopped the old man for a while. That was the golden chance for Yalan and Tai Mu to attack and wound him. If Shi Yang hadn't distracted the old man, they would have had no way to get rid of the illusions so quickly. And of course, they would have had no chance to damage that man. They had seen the battle between Shi Yang and the old man. They understood that they didn't have the means to counter that old fellow, but Shi Yang did. Although their realms were 1 level higher than his, they had had no way of dealing with that old fellow. The powers Shi Yang had demonstrated frightened them. Follow me. I know where he is. *CK him. This old dog is too cunning. He has provoked us to separate and make us kill each other so that he could clean us up at the end. When he saw that we didn't buy it, he used the illusions to delude us. Basically, he didn't want to spare any one of us alive. Shi Yang snorted, then continued, I've left a wisp of soul consciousness in his sea of consciousness. I can locate him. The directions our purgatory tokens have sensed are all made up. None of them is true. You're at the first sky of King God realm, but you could leave a beam of your soul consciousness in his sea of consciousness. Are you sure? Yalan's eyes brightened, not believing him. Tai Mu gawked. Impossible. You and he are at 2 different levels. It's possible that he can leave a beam of his soul consciousness in your sea of consciousness. But how could you? I've cultivated special powers Upanishad. My soul consciousness has mixed with space power. It can avoid his sensing for a short while. However, it won't last long. We should hurry. If we are too late and he deletes my wisp of soul consciousness, we won't be able to find him. Yalan and Tai Mu reacted quickly to what he said. They nodded and didn't linger. Shi Yang took the lead. His body flashed like the rainbow, weaving through the forest like a shuttle. Yalan and Tai Mu stayed close behind him. After 1 hour, he halted, looking at the valley in front of them and waving his hand. This place. Yalan and Taimu stopped, looking at that valley disbelievingly. Impossible, they shouted. The valley in between the mountains was covered in layers of grey shadows and mists. Folds of barriers were set that covered the whole area. Chaotic energy stayed inside the barriers particularly. It seemed to hide the extreme dangers. That area was apparently a prohibited land in the extreme purgatory field. The magical extreme purgatory field had so many similar areas. When normal participants encountered such places, they would try to avoid them at all costs. No one dared to intrude. Rumors said that those barriers were made of the initial natural formations of this land. The imperial master of several previous generations had created them. Let alone the participants, even the owner of the divine nation Du Tianji couldn't understand all the mysteries of those barriers. Before the participants entered the extreme purgatory field, the host would explain and tell them to stay away from those prohibited areas. According to them, those forbidden areas were the key nodes that created the extreme purgatory field. These areas hid so many mysterious dangers. If they entered those places rashly, their soul altars could possibly vanish. They could also break the balance of the extreme purgatory field, which would prevent it from functioning properly. Almost all the participants followed this rule. They wouldn't enter these places willingly. Out of those who dared to intrude, not many got out alive. Magical energy fluctuations signaled from that valley, stating that it was one of the banned lands of the extreme purgatory field. Shi Yang wouldn't dare intrude such a place if he still had his previous cultivation base. He would leave early to get away from running into any unexpected troubles. However, it was different now. That cunning old fella was hiding in there. Once he could recover and show up for a second time, he would bring greater dangers. If they didn't take the chance to destroy him when he got hurt, Shi Yang would never forgive himself for not preventing this wicked man from doing evil deeds. He dared to get in there. What are we afraid of? Shi Yang glared at Yalan and Taimu, his face persistent. Whether you are coming with me or not, I'm going in there. This cunning old fella has grudges against us. He won't leave us alone easily. He is much more familiar with the extreme purgatory field than we are, and he can even dodge the purgatory token sensing. If he is alive, he will always be some hidden danger. We must destroy him now. That freak has joined the extreme purgatory field many times. He must be familiar with this place. If he dared to get inside, I think he has some backup. We don't know anything about this place. Isn't it too risky? Taimu said with a worried expression on his face. He couldn't make up his mind. Yalan frowned as she struggled to decide whether to get in there or leave. Perhaps the prohibited area hides some secrets related to the extreme purgatory field. Maybe due to those secrets, that old man could dodge the purgatory token sensing. If he might know that, why can't we? Shi Yang pondered for a while and then shouted, I must get in there. Then, he flew like a sharp sword piercing toward the barriers covering the valley. Boom! It was like he had bumped into a giant rubber ball. His flying body bounced back with a tremendous force. An immense energy ran through his body. The impact made him dizzy. Confused, Shi Yang went back over to Yalan and Taimu. His face darkened. Strong barriers. Hard to break. I can't pierce through it. Damn it. How did he do it? He must know the mysteries of the barriers. Yalan's face was somber. She hesitated for a while and said, I think we should give up. If we take risks and intrude, I'm not sure if we can gain the upper hand in his familiar fighting arena. However, if we attack him outside, we can join hands and win. Taimu supported her. Shi Yang, don't act rashly. Being stubborn isn't always good. People who can achieve big accomplishments are all crazy and stubborn. Shi Yang contemplated for 1 second and laughed sinisterly. It is just a barrier. I think I will be able to break it. Then, his thoughts flickered. The sky-breaking shuttle appeared from the storage ring. He sent a beam of his soul consciousness into the shuttle. I want to break that barrier. How much energy do you need? 1/3 of your power. Okay. Wisps of fine energy circulated, rolling grumblingly and massively pouring into the sky-breaking shuttle. Receiving the energy from his body, the sky-breaking shuttle, designed to break all kind of barriers and restrictions, turned into a shooting light that tore layers of barriers, flying toward the center of the forbidden land. Shi Yang turned around, glaring at Taimu and Yalan. He ignored their astonished faces, turned into a bunch of light before disappearing shortly. He broke it. Did he just break it? Taimu's eyes showed that he couldn't believe what he just saw. He shook his head. Who is this boy? How can he be so magical? No wonder why he has the potential to replace Aojera. He is such a tough character. I finally know why Master Carthew favors him. Yalan contemplated for a while, her face astonished. She turned to Taimu. What should we do now? Taimu was hesitant. We don't know the situations in there. If we barge in, I'm not sure if we will be safe. The old man is a third sky of King Godrealm warrior. This place is his den. I don't think intruding is a good idea. Yalan pondered for a while and nodded in agreement. Forget it. We should wait for a while. I know intruding into someone's territory would be taking a big risk. While they were talking, the light passage created by the skybreaking shuttle gradually vanished, cutting off their entry. Even if they wanted to get in there, they lost their chance. The scene changed subtly. Shi Yang was standing in a beautiful blooming valley. Two streams crossed each other, which were clear enough to see the bottom. Small fish swam back and forth happily. Wild grass grew up to people's waist in every corner of the valley. They looked like the fuzz of a giant beast. The air was fresh, cool, and humid in the valley. Earth and heaven energy were very thick. The wild grass was mowed in a small area of the valley where a small cottage stood. The door was open, revealing an old, pale man using pellets to recover. He was the old man Shi Yang had encountered. In the moment Shi Yang saw the man, the old man also noticed him. He jolted up, his expression changing dramatically in surprise. He shouted, "Kid, how did you get in here? Didn't those barriers make you struggle? How could you?" "Nothing is impossible." Shi Yang frowned. His eyes were still blood-red as he was maintaining the rampage realm. Energy boiled and rolled in his body massively, his aura brutal and malignant. He walked step by step towards that old man. His eyes became more ruthlessly bloodthirsty. "You got hurt badly. You want to hide and recover in here so that you could continue playing with us. Haha, you have a good place, indeed. Seems like you've been staying here for a long time and got familiar with the conditions." That old man stopped restoring his aura and walked out of his cottage. In front of him were the two crossing streams. He had installed the net to restrain the fish in the streams. It seemed that he kept the fish for food. The whole scene was beautiful and harmonious. The old man stood by the stream and he stooped to watch the small fish, inhaling the pleasant fragrance of flowers permeating the air. He wasn't tense or anxious at all. He even beamed a smile at Shi Yang. "I'm glad you came. My purgatory token is here now." Shi Yang smiled, slightly shaking his head. "It won't be so easy." Chapter 789, Deterrent Force. Chapter 789, Deterrent Force. A corner of the Purgatory Star. Leona, Aogu duo, and the others frowned while looking at the lake, their faces astounded. Yalan and Taimu reappeared. After the battle between Shi Yang and the old man finished, their surroundings reappeared. In the area they had fought, there was a deep pit that could be recognized from 1,000 miles away. Yalan and Taimu were discussing something. "Where is Shi Yang?" Carthew knitted his brows. There was a battle. Who did they fight? Shi Yang? Possibly. Rochester curled his lips. But where is that kid? If Yalan and Taimu fought Shi Yang, who would win? It would be a pretty even match. Da Lei squinted. Anyway, it seems like Yalan and Taimu won. Shi Yang disappeared. Did he get killed? That was what he wanted to see. Carthew, your subordinates are still enthusiastic. Haha. Aogu duo grinned. Shi Yang has killed a lot of people. He brought death, now he has to bear it. If he got killed, it would not be abnormal. Did you order Yalan and Taimu to do something? Leona's face darkened. A gleam of brutal thought sparkled deep in her dark green eyes. Carthew was scared out of his wits and he kept shaking his head. How could I? I like that kid a lot. I have treated him well. In my gravitational room, he spoke with Yalan and Tai Mu. I didn't think they would battle each other. As he explained, Leona snorted and didn't say more. Some force had covered that area. I don't know what happened, but I think the three of them won't compete against each other, Du Tianle said uncertainly while rubbing his chin. What happened? Carthew mumbled to himself, curious about the situation. The situation was similar in the dark firmament star. Du Tianji also had these suspicions. He looked at that giant mirror with astonishment. He was baffled for a while, then muttered, "Our divine nation hasn't had an imperial master for a long time. I know the previous imperial masters all lived in the extreme purgatory field. That place should store their inheritance. After this training ends, it's time for us to find an imperial master. How about the business you have done?" He glared at Zi Yarrow. Zi Yarrow's bold brows knitted together. Her beautiful eyes flared a strange halo. She pondered for a while, then shook her head. He doesn't want to take the imperial master role. The knot in his heart hasn't been untied yet. It seems that I will have to work on him myself. Du Tianji nodded as if he already knew this result beforehand. After screening him, I can say that he is currently one of the most impressive alchemists of the entire Raging Flamestar area. If he agrees to assist the Divine Nation, we will have more strong experts. Sigh, only if we had an imperial master, he could inherit from the few generations before him. We would have been able to give a clear path. What a pity. It is shameful for me to talk to him. Zi Yarrow kept silent, her face complicated. She didn't know exactly what had happened that year. She wasn't sure if Du Tianji's shame was related to her mother's death. "Zhao, you are not young anymore. Do you have anyone in mind right now?" Du Tianji suddenly asked. Zi Yarrow's beautiful face blushed. She shook her head shyly. "I don't want to think about this for the time being. Previously, old Fan of the 9-Star Chamber of Commerce told me about his son. You've heard about his only son, Fan Tianpo. His background and abilities are not weaker than Ao Jia. In the Raging Flamestar area, the name of Fan Tianpo is well known. His bearings aren't bad either. I heard that he is handsome. He is also excellent in many aspects. You know old Fan's status and position in the 9-Star Chamber of Commerce. If we want to talk about the perfect match for you in the Raging Flamestar area, he would be the one. What do you think?" "No," Zi Yarrow shook her head after contemplating for a while. "I don't really know about this at the moment." "All right then. I also need time to think. Consider him." Du Tianji's eyes sparkled. "The ethereal god realm is a big door. I don't dare go before preparing. However, I have to do it. If something happens to you, you better find the man in the solar star exploding fragment field. He will take care of you. Father, if something happens to you, what about our divine nation?" Zi Yarrow forced a smile. "The 5 great feudal vassals have their own forces. They're all mighty. Without you, who would suppress them?" Du Tianji kept silent. After a while, he answered deliberately, "I believe in their loyalty to the divine nation." "But Da Lei," Zi Yarrow wanted to say something but she didn't finish. "Do not babble," Du Tianji shouted, giving an angry look. "When I'm about to break through, I'll have my arrangement." Zi Yarrow nodded begrudgingly. Her look shifted to the shining mirror once again. She didn't know why she was worrying about Shi Yang. Perhaps it was because she didn't want anything bad to happen to him. She had heard about Fan Tianpo of the 9-Star Chamber of Commerce. She knew he was a great character, but she didn't know why she had no interest in him. One of the forbidden lands of the extreme purgatory field. The old man who was good at using illusions stood nonchalantly where the 2 streams crossed each other. He silently watched the fish swimming back and forth. "Are you familiar with this place?" Shi Yang walked over to him in a normal pace. His calmness was scarily abnormal. "Yeah, I got used to this place. I survived the extreme purgatory field on many close occasions thanks to this place." The old man scooped water with his hands and drank it. He stooped and chuckled. "I'm hurt, and so are you. In this place, you won't have any backup. You didn't recognize how perilous this situation is for you, did you? I'm glad you came. This means I can get your purgatory token, get out of this damn place alive, and gain back my freedom. You think so? Shi Yang grinned. Then I want to see how you can take the purgatory token on my waist. Yeah, you're right. We're both wounded. But there's one thing you'll never be better than me at. I am younger than you and my recovery ability is much faster than what you think. Young. Being young is useful, my ass. The old man finally stood up, looking at him in the eyes. Kid, if you want to court death, don't blame me. You just want a purgatory token, right? Shi Yang was surprised for a while. He said, in fact, your wish is easy to fulfill. If I can help you, will you share the secrets you know with me? It's just a purgatory token, I'm sure I can get it for you. The old man was caught off guard, but he still laughed out of interest. What do you mean you will get a purgatory token for me? You know what that means, right? I don't know you. But I know you want to kill a participant, the young talented and favored subordinate of one of the 5 feudal vassals, right? Will you do this for me? Why not? Shi Yang pursed his lips. If I don't kill them, someone else will. I have someone I must kill in this place. He's hunting me down with all of his best efforts too. The old man didn't hasten. He stretched leisurely, glaring at Shi Yang. Tell me, what happened? Have you ever heard about Aodgera? Shi Yang pondered before asking. The old man's eyes got colder. He snorted. Of course I know him. Aogu Juo's nephew, a genius of the divine nation. You want to kill him? Shi Yang nodded. Ah, you've been idle in the extreme purgatory field for so many years. But how do you know about Aodgera? It seems like you hate him. What happened? I haven't been out for all these years, but people will be put in the extreme purgatory field from time to time. From them, I get information of the world outside. The old man snorted with a cold visage. I don't like people who are related to Aogu Juo. Aogu Juo has imprisoned me here. Aodgera is his nephew who has outstanding performance. Of course I have to notice him. If I had known he was here, I would have found and targeted him. Whatever will irritate Aogu Juo, I will do them all. Aogu Juo captured you? Haha, interesting, interesting. Seems like we have common goals. Shi Yang laughed evilly. By the way, what did you do to get yourself jailed here? It has nothing to do with you, snorted the old man. Shi Yang just laughed, unbothered by his response. 100 meters away from the old man, he took off his clothes, discarding them conveniently before stepping into the stream to wash the bloodstains on his body. The old man's eyes suddenly sparkled with divine light as he focused on the young man. Using the stream's fresh water to wash away the blood on his body, Shi Yang revealed a refined iron-like body that didn't show even a single cut. The old man had fought him just 1 hour ago. He understood that although Shi Yang's god body didn't explode, he received a lot of cuts and wounds. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had so much blood on his body. However, Shi Yang now stood vigorous without a single scratch. Energy in his body circulated smoothly. His god body shimmered, showing that he was in his peak condition. Nothing in his body provided evidence that he got hurt badly. After 1 hour of adjusting his aura and energy, there was not much change for the old man. The old man still had a lot of wounds on his body. The holes deep to the bone that the 3 bone thorns left on his chest and back were still there. His waist, abdomen, arms, and legs were covered with cuts which were caused by Yalan and Taimu's bombarding powers. Shi Yang was no longer damaged. This discovery silenced the old man as he had planned to attack him one more time. He suddenly realized that Shi Yang intruding this place alone and bragging in front of him wasn't just mere boasting. There was a reason why he had such confidence. In front of the old man, Shi Yang washed before putting on new, clean garments. All of a sudden, he urged the power of the immortal demon blood, pouring it into his arm. His iron fist pounded the ground grumblingly. Boom boom. The impact from his fist touching the ground caused great tremors. An area of several thousand meters seemed to get hit by a meteor. The ground cracked as if there was an earthquake. The pits that appeared were so deep that people wouldn't be able to see the bottom. The condensed energy of the immortal demon blood was sent to the ground, creating an earth-shaking scene. The tremendous energy ran deep under the extreme purgatory field. Grumbling noise from the tremors continually echoed. The mountain near the valley was trembling as if it was about to collapse. Such a scale of damage was really scary indeed. Even the old man at the king god realm discolored in fright. He didn't dare act rashly anymore. Shi Yang retrieved his powers, looking at the dozen-meter-deep pit in front of him with satisfaction. He turned around, smiling at the old man. "You still want to ambush and kill me, eh? Yeah, do you still think you would succeed?" The old man's face darkened and he said nothing. "Can we talk for a while?" Shi Yang calmed down, strolling towards the old man, his face casual and peaceful. He wasn't worried about being ambushed. The old man's face was gloomy and uncertain. He gazed at Shi Yang for a while and said, "True. You've proven your abilities. I can't kill you easily, it is true. All right, I'll go with the less risky option. What do you want to know?" Chapter 790, Forbidden Areas Wonder. Chapter 790, Forbidden Areas Wonder. I want to know how you are able to avoid the sensing powers of the Purgatory token. How can you hide your life magnetic field? And how did you enter this forbidden place? Shi Yang stood firmly by the stream. Although he remained alert, he looked nonchalant. Shi Yang didn't think that this old man would attack him for the second time. He could tell that the old man should understand now. Indeed, he didn't dare attack anymore. Like Shi Yang, the old man calmed down eventually. "What you want to know is related to this stone." While talking, he took out a cube-shaped stone from his sleeve. That stone had some patterns that looked like natural drawings or formations. It held magical energy that made the patterns move and shimmer. The old man bared his teeth in a broad smile. He threw the stone at the ground. "Try it again." Shi Yang sent a wisp of soul consciousness into the Purgatory token. Magically, the life magnetic of the old man was visible in the Purgatory token. The token was even able to precisely sense the strength of his life energy. Shi Yang's eyes brightened, studying the cube stone. He said with astonishment, "This stone can cut off the sensing of the Purgatory token and keep my soul consciousness from detecting you." "Yes," the old man smiled arrogantly. He quickly picked up the cube stone. "With this gem, the contestants in the extreme Purgatory field can't find me with their Purgatory token. With this gem, I can enter 99 forbidden places of the extreme Purgatory field easily without worrying about the barriers." The cube stone disappeared into his sleeve. Shi Yang's sensing did not work again. He couldn't use the Purgatory token to lock the old man. Although they were standing face to face, his soul consciousness couldn't sense the living fluctuations of this old fella. This cube stone seemed to be able to hide the god soul and the soul altar. It was a marvelous device. "Where did you get it?" Shi Yang was curious. "Here, I can't tell you. I can only say that there are several stones like this. Except for me, the others who keep this stone are all the craziest prisoners of the extreme Purgatory field. After participating in the extreme Purgatory field for several times, we agreed to keep this a secret. Even the owner of the divine nation Du Tianji doesn't know about it." The old man grinned. "It is also why I've joined the extreme Purgatory field 5 times but remained alive. If I encounter someone I can't fight, I hide in the forbidden places." Shi Yang's eyes brightened. He nodded. "No wonder. Seems like you've had good encounters in the extreme Purgatory field. You said there are 99 forbidden places like this place. Do they all have layers of barriers?" "Yes, 99 in total. I guess they are the formation eyes and the key nodes that contain the extreme Purgatory field. The existences of the 99 forbidden lands maintain the balance and the magical effect of the extreme Purgatory field. Only while holding this square stone can you get in there safely." The old man gazed at him, his eyes bizarre. "It is shocking that you were able to get in here. How?" "As far as I've known, even I, at the third sky of King God Realm, can't get through such complicated barriers without this cube stone." "I can't tell you either," Shi Yang beamed a faint smile. "Everyone has his own secrets. If you don't want to talk much, neither will I. Fine. Now, I will take you somewhere. The old man pondered for a while then smiled. Perhaps you will like it. Oh right, I'm Jiang Ji. You. Shi Yang. Come with me. I'll take you there. The old man named Jiang Ji didn't bother with the bloodstains on his body. He became more excited, walking quickly through the cottage to another place deeper inside the valley. Shi Yang didn't linger. He nodded and followed him quietly. Flowers bloomed everywhere in this valley, grass also present in the entire area. Water murmured. Fish swam. The whole place was peaceful and harmonious like a fairyland. No matter how hard people could imagine, they would never picture a wonderful place like this in the bloody extreme purgatory field. The Forbidden Lands were intimidatingly dangerous, but they also hid a different world. Jiang Ji looked very familiar with this place. While walking deep into the valley, he explained, just like me, those who have the same cube stones occupy their own territory. Yeah, they're the forbidden places. 5 out of the 99 forbidden places are actually wonderful. You will see soon. Shi Yang listened to him attentively before asking, if you stayed in the forbidden land of the extreme purgatory field after 3 years of bloody training, will people be able to detect you? Jiang Ji turned around, laughing. What do you think? People out there can't find you, can they? Shi Yang replied uncertainly. Of course not. I'm being honest. After each time I used my forbidden territory, I always got out. However, the 4 others who hold the territory of the 4 wonderful forbidden places have never left. They stay in the forbidden lands all the time. The owner of the divine nation deemed them dead. He doesn't know that they've survived and lived a better life. Since I have something to do, I have to go out. The other 4 consider the forbidden lands their home. They no longer want to leave. Jiang Ji didn't turn to see him. He explained before walking away. Shi Yang's eyes sparkled strangely, amazed at what he was hearing. If what this old man said was true, there were 4 other people like him in the extreme purgatory field with the cube stones. Despite the fact that the lands were harsh, they have stayed in extreme purgatory field for a long time. Age and realms for the other 4 were probably not normal. They must all be tough characters. Since they got the cube stones, even Du Tianji couldn't find them or know their situations. Although they can dodge the purgatory tokens sensing, why did they stay for several hundred years in the extreme purgatory field? Soon, he realized the answer. Jiang Ji suddenly stopped, pointing at the end of the valley and shouted, "Here we are." Shi Yang stopped walking. At first glance, he was dumbstruck. It was a grand palace. Stood between the 2 mountains at the end of the valley was a grand palace. The high mountain that jutted up to the sky provided shade for this palace. Thick clouds hovered above the palace like water ink that blocked light and didn't disperse. The grand palace radiated immense divine light. It looked like this palace was made of gold, jade, and gemstone. It was tall and pleasing to the eyes. Stone pillars stood in the center, supporting the palace. This scenery looked exactly like what you would find in a fairyland. At this moment, they were standing next to the nearest pillar which could even shield the whole sky. Lifting up their heads to look at the palace, they felt so small. Magical energy fluctuations diffused from time to time from the foundation pillar of the palace. They rippled out like magnificent waves. Each wave had at least dozens of layers, and each layer was a magical barrier. They were all mysterious and conveyed the might of nature, which silenced them in awe. Instinctively, Shi Yang wanted to go in. Jiang Ji shouted all of a sudden. "Watch out!" Shi Yang halted, turning around to look at him with astonishment. "Those rippling waves can easily take your life away. I've been here for so many years but I can't dissolve it. You shouldn't take risks, alright?" Jiang Ji grinned bizarrely. The other 4's situations aren't different from mine. They also have a grand palace like this in their forbidden places. Do you get why they aren't trying to leave so quickly now? Because of this palace? Shi Yang was surprised. Nodding, Jiang Ji's face was solemn. I can tell you that the 5 palaces in the extreme purgatory field should belong the 5 previous imperial masters of the dark firmament divine nation. Du Tianji might know about this, but it is not certain. The former imperial masters hid something from the owner of the divine nation. That is why they didn't let him know about the mysteries of this place. I don't know what they hid in there, but I'm sure that these palaces have something. The other four also believe the same thing. They aren't hurrying to leave because they want to discover this secret. Shi Yang discolored in fright. If I didn't have a reason, I would never leave this place. I would break the defense there and get into the palace to see what's in there. Jiang Ji's face was serious. Kid, I brought you here to tell you that. If you give me a purgatory token, I will give you the cube stone. Although I can't make it, I think you can. I can't wait here any longer. I need to leave. Just consider this an exchange. I'm sure you won't bear a loss. You got the cube stone but you can't get in there? Shi Yang didn't agree immediately. He was still suspicious. That stone can only bring me through the barriers of the forbidden place. I can't get in the palace. I've tried many times. My knowledge and power aren't enough to solve this problem. Perhaps, my realm isn't enough. Jiang Ji forced a smile. You have the third sky of King God Realm cultivation base and you can't do anything. Why do you think I can? Shi Yang burst out laughing, shaking his head. I won't be fooled. You don't want to fight but you want to keep me in this place for the rest of my life. You want to use a secret to bind me. Good plan. Don't you want to know what is in there? Jiang Ji frowned. I do. But I don't want to do things in vain. I don't want my efforts to be in vain by wasting time in this place where even birds don't want to poop. Shi Yang shook his head. Birds don't even poop. Jiang Ji didn't know whether to cry or smile. Kid, you don't know your fortune. Why did you say so? Once the 3 years of the training in the extreme purgatory field ends, the sensitive feelings towards earth and heaven powers will disappear. Why only 3 years? Because they can only hold it for 3 years. No more. After 3 years, the extreme purgatory field will be like other places. It won't be able to offer assistance to warriors and their realms. 94 out of the 99 forbidden areas will be the same. The energy there will disappear. However, the 5 forbidden areas with the palaces won't disappear. The sensitive sensing of natural energy will remain here forever. Jiang Ji shouted. Shi Yang was shaken. He finally understood the heavy conditions that this old man offered him. Chapter 791. Disappear quietly. Chapter 791. Disappear quietly. If a warrior doesn't go out and enjoy the subtle mysteries of the extreme purgatory field to understand natural powers better every day, even if he has a bad innate endowment, accumulating for years can help with their understanding of powers and realms. This forbidden land was a magical area that could help warriors progress their realm. Staying in this area, a man's perception of realms and powers becomes clearer and stronger. Such an enticement was big enough. Shi Yang was touched. His mind was in a flutter. However, while he was still dismayed, Jiang Ji's fantasy Upanishad suddenly appeared. Jiang Ji had been waiting for this chance for a long time. Seeing Shi Yang's confused eyes, he seized the moment and attacked. He activated the 1000 fantasy domain. Jiang Ji looked at him. Magical light shot out from his eyes. A gleam of confusion crossed Shi Yang's face. He couldn't differentiate illusions from reality. Jiang Ji's figures multiplied in his vision. Layers of water-like barriers suddenly disappeared. A beautiful figure appeared in his retinue. It's Xia Xinyang. More people appeared unceasingly. Shi Jian, Yang Tian Emperor, Yang Mu, Yi Tian Mo. They all came, smiling as if they wanted to tell him something. Shi Yang was baffled. He felt betrayed. His god soul was tempted. He didn't realize that he was walking towards that group of people. Crack. His body immediately bumped into those layers of water ripples. He seemed to be bound and couldn't even wriggle. Shi Yang's face changed dramatically. At this moment, Shi Yang found that he was standing next to a towering pillar under the palace. Layers of barriers tied him. His god soul was restrained. Chaotic energies gathered. The magical barriers revived and started to affect him. Jiang Ji suddenly smiled. Shi Yang, you're still a tender sprout. I'm too familiar with this place. Should I be so kind to bring you here? Bound with so many layers, Shi Yang was enraged, but he had no solution. The barriers were subtle and magical that acted like countless ropes tightening around his body. He couldn't wiggle out of them. He kept thinking of ways to escape as Shi Yang contacted the skybreaking shuttle. How can I get rid of it? Your power is insufficient. What? The barriers in this place are all strong and marvelous. Even if I take all of your energy, I can't break them. Unless you know the method or reached the peak of King God Realm, you won't be able to do it. I don't know the realm of the person who built the barriers, but the wonderful features of this place are beyond my imagination. My maker was just a sacred grade blacksmith. His realm wasn't enough to make me a higher grade treasure, so. Shi Yang grimaced. This is the first time the skybreaking shuttle failed him completely. He thought there was no barrier that the skybreaking shuttle couldn't break in this world. But today, he found that he was wrong. He had underestimated the might of the dark firmament divine nation's imperial master. You shouldn't be outraged. In fact, I don't have any bad intentions. If you can break the mysteries of the barriers while you are in here, not only can you escape, but you will be able to get in the palace. Then, you will know the secret that I couldn't figure out even after spending more than 200 years here. Jiang Ji beamed a faint smile. The cube stone in his hand glistened. A tender beam of light like a feather fell on Shi Yang's waist and took his purgatory token. Haha, I tell you this. I have no grudges against Aogu Duo. He did put me in this damn place, but it was because I wanted to get here. My purpose was to enter the extreme purgatory field. Shi Yang could only stare at the man taking his purgatory token away. He had no solutions and he just remained silent, his eyes cold and dark. Jiang Ji's face darkened and became sinister. That year, I was at only the Sky Realm. My whole family was massacred. My wife was raped in front of me. I must survive to take revenge. But my archenemy was too strong. I wasn't his match. Living was hard for me at that time, too. Although the raging Flamestar area's vast, I can't find enough shelter. But the extreme purgatory field was just the place that I needed. My hands are soaked in blood. I've killed many to make Aogu Duo jail me in the extreme purgatory field. Staying here, I can avoid my enemy's pursuit. Also, I can have a better place to cultivate and increase my realm. That is why I've stayed idle here for 250 years. From the Sky Realm, I've reached the third sky of King God Realm. I've sacrificed a lot for my revenge. His face distorted savagely while talking. Finally, today, I gain the force for my revenge. Since you have only the first sky of King God Realm cultivation base and Aogu is at the second sky of King God Realm, I don't see how you will have a chance to kill him if he also has help from others. I don't want to make this bet, either. If I can have the purgatory token from you, why would I take a risk? Jiang Ji gradually pulled himself together. You don't need to hate me. I still think this is just an exchange between us. I told you the secrets that I kept for years. If you can break the barriers and get into the palace, perhaps you will have the luck that I can't imagine. If I didn't want to leave so badly, I wouldn't do this to you. I would stay here like the other four until I found the secrets of this place. I'm now giving this honor to you. You should thank me. You're still young. You still have time to play. I'm so sorry I can't stay here with you. Enjoy. I need to get out of here. Jiang Ji rubbed his chin. After another year, the extreme purgatory field's training will end. I will leave first. If we meet again, I will make up for your loss today. And yeah, I have to remind you that the other four aren't easy to talk to like I am. If you meet them, you have to be careful. They are the true villains of the raging Flamestar area. They are very patient and are all at the third sky of King God Realm. After so many years studying this place, the five of us have found that if one of the 5 palaces is broken, the others would change accordingly. Solve this mystery yourself. After Jiang Ji finished, he laughed evilly before leaving. He passed by the small cottage, roasted some fish, ate them, then picked some stuff. He left with satisfaction. After 1 hour, Jiang Ji appeared from the forbidden place. Yalan and Tai Mu were waiting outside. Seeing him, they were startled. They immediately got on guard, preparing for Jiang Ji's sudden attack. Jiang Ji looked at them who looked like they were encountering the archenemy. He laughed. "Don't be so tense. I won't risk my life fighting you. I got what I want." He shook Shi Yang's purgatory token. Tai Mu was shaken, shouting, "Where's Shi Yang?" "Dead, of course." Jiang Ji laughed louder. He didn't treasure his life. He shouldn't have broken into the prohibited area. The barriers there had torn him into pieces. "I didn't need to move my finger to receive this piece of purgatory token. So wonderful, right?" Tai Mu and Yalan grimaced listening to him. They tensed up. "I told you, I just need a purgatory token. If you don't want to get into more trouble, don't act rashly." Jiang Ji didn't bother with Tai Mu and Yalan. He left quietly and hurriedly as if he had something to finish. Yalan and Tai Mu looked helplessly at the man leaving. They didn't dare act recklessly. Jiang Ji had the third sky of King God Realm cultivation base, and his 1000 fantasy domain had affected them directly. Yalan and Tai Mu understood that without Shi Yang, they wouldn't be able to fight the old man. The two contemplated for a while, their eyes gazing at the forbidden area. After a while, they sighed. Too bad. Shi Yang was quite the character. I have never seen anyone that excellent at the first sky of King God Realm. If he survived, he would have been the most dazzling star of the divine nation, Yalan said with emotions. Tai Mu nodded heavily. He was too reckless. He didn't listen to us. If he didn't go inside there, that freaky, old man wouldn't have done anything to him. If we went together, that man wouldn't have been able to attack us. Sigh. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. Forget it. He chose his path. We had no choice. Yalan shook her head with regret. We should go. We still have a mission to finish. We should accomplish our task before saying more. Tai Mu agreed. He glared at the prohibited land for the last time before leaving. They didn't know that Shi Yang was still alive inside. After Jiang Ji left Yalan and Tai Mu, he wandered aimlessly, leaving no shadow. Aogu Duo and the others outside couldn't see him. His cube stone had concealed him from the purgatory token sensing and the people using the lake to watch what was happening inside the extreme purgatory field. Jiang Ji moved discreetly in the extreme purgatory field. He visited 4 other places, the 4 forbidden lands. He and the other 4 had made an appointment. He told the others that he couldn't stay here any longer and that he must leave. A boy had replaced him. He would finish what Jiang Ji couldn't. Moving between the 4 forbidden lands took him half a year. Participants in the extreme purgatory field were still killing and chasing prisoners and bloodthirsty villains. No one had met Shi Yang. Aogu Duo, Leona, Du Tianji, and Zi Yarrow in the Dark Firmament Star couldn't use the magical mirror created by the former Imperial Master to spot Shi Yang in the extreme purgatory field. That forbidden land was able to avoid all kinds of sensing abilities. Everyone thought Shi Yang was dead. Time flies fast. Soon, the training in the extreme purgatory field had come to an end. The term of 3 years was about to end. Aoger didn't see Shi Yang. The battle that everyone had been waiting for didn't take place. When the magical effects of the extreme purgatory field vanished, Du Tianle and the 5 great feudal vassals cooperated in checking the battlefields. The lucky prisoners and villains who survived were jailed again. Du Tianle faced the sky and shouted to call for the participants. Gradually, they came one by one. But Shi Yang had never shown up. Leona waited in silence. Her face gradually darkened. Chapter 792, Calm Down and Break the Barriers. Chapter 792, Calm Down and Break the Barriers. Aogera, Da Meng, Yalan, and Tai Mu gathered as Du Tianle were calling for them. Shi Yang hadn't come up yet. Leona continued to grimace. After a while, almost all the participants gathered but Shi Yang was still not present. Aogu Duo suddenly smiled. Leona, will you uphold our bet? Rochester, Carthew, and Da Lei also peeked at Leona with strange looks. Rochester and Dalei seemed to take pleasure in her misfortune. Sigh. I thought that Shiyang would win. I didn't expect that he would die in there. Big mistake. I wanted to wait until he got out of there and flatter the new star of the divine nation. This is so unfortunate. Rochester shook his head in disappointment and regret. If Shiyang is dead, someone else should have the purgatory token. Leona snorted, glaring at Aogu Duo, who was content with his triumph. If he dies, I'll give you a life star, of course. Good. Aogu Duo laughed. While they were talking, Du Tianji in the faraway dark firmament pondered for a while and then said, "Let's go." Zi Yaro's face was gloomy. Grief sparkled in her beautiful eyes. She got up quietly. Du Tianji touched the bright mirror in front of them. Divine light radiated gloriously. A slit appeared at the center of the mirror. The king and Zi Yaro disappeared into the slit. In the place where they could see the lake of the extreme purgatory field, Du Tianji and Zi Yaro reappeared. After he identified which way to go, Du Tianji brought Zi Yaro through several thousand miles and showed up at the place where the 5 feudal vassals gathering with just a single thought. Your Majesty. Including Du Tianle, the 5 feudal vassals kneeled down on one knee, greeting him with respect. The contestants, including Aojera, kneeled down on both knees, bending their heads over to show their humble admiration and respect to the king. Get up, Du Tianji nodded, his bearings calm and natural. Who is the winner? Liquor. Du Tianle pointed at the first female warrior under Leona's commands. She killed the most. Du Tianji smiled. Our divine nation's luck. A fantasy sky ring flew out from his finger toward Liquor. 5 creators divine pellets for you to use when you break through to the original god realm. It has the best efficacy that will give you endless torrential soul energy. A suit of level 4 divine grade armor. It can fuse perfectly with your god body to increase your fighting abilities. Liquor was thrilled and she received the fantasy sky ring. She kept saying thanks. Thank you for your grace, your majesty. I will dedicate my life to the divine nation until I die. You don't need to give thanks. You've earned them. Du Tianji smiled. His line of sight shifted to Du Tianle. We'll seal the extreme purgatory field shortly. The training in the extreme purgatory field ends now. We are still missing one person, answered Du Tianle. He's here. Du Tianji turned around, looking behind them. Get out. You got the purgatory token, so you are exempt from all charges. From now on, you can go anywhere you want in this vast space. You're free. Leona and Aogu Duo all turned around to look. Jiang Ji showed himself, his face calm. He kneeled down. Thank you for your grace, your majesty. You killed Shiyang. Zi Yaro shouted in a hoarse voice, her face ferocious. Cold light sparkled in her beautiful eyes, which could scare people. Leona also snorted. Her dark green eyes were like those of a serpent. She also made people tremble. Jiang Ji discolored. Not me. I didn't kill him. He entered a forbidden area and the energy there tore him into pieces. I just picked up his purgatory token. Forbidden land? Du Tianji frowned, but he didn't chase further. He waved his hand, not waiting for Leona or Zi Yaro to ask the man more questions. Hand back the purgatory token and leave now. From now, you are free from your prior crimes. Jiang Ji didn't say anything else. He left the purgatory token on the ground, thanked Du Tianji, before soaring up into the sky. As though he was afraid of the other's words, he disappeared instantly. Leona and Zi Yaro gazed at him with hatred and resentment. Aojera smiled brightly, walking towards Zi Yaro. He bent his body. Your Highness, are you all right? Zi Yaro looked at the smiling face of Aojera, whose look never changed. She didn't know why she felt so irritated. Anyway, Aojera was her subordinate and he had been following her for years. He had given up everything for her. She had no reason to trouble him. She nodded and said, I'm okay. Shiyang saved me. I just don't feel well when he faced such an unexpected ending. Shiyang had joined hands with bloody slaughterer Ka Tuor to kill you, Your Highness. He didn't deserve your worries. Aojera said seriously. Zi Yaro's face got colder. I don't care what the others said. He saved me in the solar star exploding fragment field. There might have been something between him and Ka Tuor. But he was never his partner, she said resolutely. If you say this is true, then it is true. I believe you, Your Highness. The smile on Aojera was forced. He was astounded for a while. In his eyes, Shi Yang was dead. There was no need to push it further. Leona, when will you pay for our bet? Aogu Duo smiled. He felt so good. After we leave the Purgatory Star, you send your men to my territory, I will hand you a life star. Leona's face grimaced. She snorted with icy, cold eyes. Everything is over. Do what you need to do. You don't need to stay in Purgatory Star anymore. Du Tianji advised faintly before nodding to Leona. Come to Dark Firmament Star with me. I have something to discuss with you. Yes, nodded Leona. You and Aojera return to Glorious Amethyst Star and prepare. You'll depart to the 9-star Chamber of Commerce soon to meet Old Fan and carry the task I've given you. Du Tianji looked at Zi Yaro. Zi Yaro nodded quietly. She felt a little bit lost. Father, I want to stay in Purgatory Star for a few days before I go. Okay, as long as you understand it. Although Shi Yang was your excellent subordinate, he is dead. Don't dwell on it for too long. The Divine Nation has many important matters now. Don't get distracted for too long. Du Tianji arranged things and then nodded to Leona. They left through the lake to return to Dark Firmament Star. Shortly after, the 4 feudal vassals Aogu Duo, Rochester, Carthew, and Da Lei adjusted their delegations and departed. They seemed to have a more important business, so they didn't linger here. Du Tien sealed all the gates of the extreme purgatory field. He also strengthened the prisons of the extreme purgatory field to ensure nothing unexpected would happen. Then, he left. Zi Yaro stayed in the Purgatory Star for 7 days. She checked all the exits of the extreme purgatory field as if she was waiting for someone or something. She didn't let Aojera come with her. She wandered around the extreme purgatory field alone. During the 7 days, she didn't find anything. Her face became darker and her mood got gloomier day after day. No miracle happened. After 7 days, Zi Yaro left with grief and bitterness. She departed from the Purgatory Star begrudgingly. She didn't know that one of the seal exits she had passed by was very close to where Shi Yang was blocked. It was so close to Shi Yang that she just needed to dash for a bit to see him. However, the Forbidden Land had blocked all of sensing for living beings inside. She couldn't sense Shi Yang's living energy. Eventually, she had to leave the Purgatory Star with deep regret. Time flew quickly. The Purgatory Star resumed its calmness. Experts all left. The extreme purgatory field was sealed. This land returned to be a quiet place. 94 out of 99 prohibited areas had disappeared. The 5 forbidden lands with magical effects still existed. Shi Yang stayed in the deepest place of his valley, inching through layers of barriers with great efforts. That grand palace hid in the deepest place of the forbidden land under the shade of a tall mountain. Thick clouds concealed it. No one could see anything through that layer of clouds. He came closer to a towering, massive pillar. 2 years had passed. During 2 years, he was always trying to decipher the subtle mysteries of the barriers. There were 49 layers of barrier covering the palace. At this point in time, he had broken 20 layers. Each layer was a magnificent formation, which hid the great mysteries of earth and heaven. The reason why Jiang Ji couldn't break those barriers through his 250 years staying here was that he wasn't a blacksmith, which had limited his abilities. With his King God Realm cultivation base, he had to use the soul consciousness to discover that subtle formation. Of course, his progress was too slow. Shi Yang was different. He had a natural advantage. He had the experience of studying magical formations in the blacksmith secrets of success. He had gained an unimaginable amount of experience and wealth. A layer of barrier consisted of many smaller formations. Although it was magically complex, a divine-grade blacksmith with wholehearted dedication could still break it. Even it wasn't fast, he could still make progress. If Jiang Ji had known that Shi Yang at the King God realm had such tremendous forces and that he was also a divine-grade blacksmith, he wouldn't have used those barriers to bind him. After deciphering each layer, his understanding of blacksmithing would reach a new height. The formations that built the barriers all hid the magical truth of nature. During this time, his realm was refined and strengthened, and his soul was sublimated. His sensing of natural powers became much more sensitive in this place. While he focused on breaking the barriers, the benefits it brought to his realm was hard to estimate. Whenever a layer was broken, his realm would be refined one level. This also benefited his soul altar. While Shi Yang didn't notice it, his three powers Upanishad had a subtle change when he attempted to comprehend the mysteries of earth and energy inside those barriers. He had forgotten Jiang Ji's trap. Now he had just sunk into his work of deciphering barriers, which were one of the most magical journeys of his martial path. His mind changed as he had developed advantages. His work speed accelerated. Today, he had broken through the 42nd layer out of 49 layers. He suddenly felt a marvelous commotion from inside the palace. At the same time, the other 4/3 sky of King God realm warriors in the other 4 forbidden areas of the extreme purgatory field, who were doing the same thing with him, all witnessed a strange occurrence. They were all shaken. Chapter 793, Meet Up in Precincts. Chapter 793, Meet Up in Precincts. After Jiang Ji left the Purgatory Star, he dashed furiously in the general direction of the 9-star Chamber of Commerce. He didn't have a war chariot or a battleship, so he flew by himself at the fastest possible speed that a 3rd sky of King God realm warrior could travel at. After 3 months, he flew past the star area near the dark firmament star. Every time he exhausted his energy, Jiang Ji would find a place to rest and use the divine crystals to recovery. Then, he would continue moving. Today, when he consumed a lot of his energy, he found an abandoned mineral star. That mineral star was almost empty. It had caves of various sizes. From a distance, it looked like a giant hornet hive. Its energy was exhausted a long time ago. No pieces of or remained. Jiang Ji beamed a faint smile. His body descended like a shadow on the mineral star. 10 medium-quality divine crystals flew out from his fantasy sky ring. As he sat down to absorb the crystals, he discolored in fright. The darkness covered him like a dome of the sky. There wasn't a beam of light in that darkness. He couldn't even see his own fingers. It was like a prison that made his soul decay. Jiang Ji was shaken. He was frightened, looking here and there, but he couldn't see anything. His heart sank to the bottom of an abyss. He was astounded, and it took him a while for him to react. He kneeled down anxiously and said with respect, "Greetings, Madam Leona." The Raging Flame Star Arena had so many powers Upanishad, and some of them were so famous that everyone knew. The Absolute Dark Upanishad was the flagship of the leader of the 5 feudal vassals, Leona. No one else possessed this power. As the endless darkness engulfed Jiang Ji, he was initially bewildered, but then he immediately knew whom he was encountering. The Bloody Butcher of the Divine Nation, commander of the Bloody Legion, head of the 5 brutal devils, Madam Leona. Jiang Ji had no intention of resisting. He kneeled down on one knee and slightly stooped his head. "I wonder why Madam Leona has humbled her good self to visit this place. What are my orders?" A faint light was revealed silently. A woman looked as sinister and cold as ghosts that sat on the stone ground by a cave that ran deep into the ground. She squinted and said calmly, "You have 2 options." Jiang Ji stooped lower with a serious face. "I am listening. 1. I will kill you, destroy your soul altar and detain your god soul. Then, I will use my secret techniques to take your memories." Leona's voice was indifferent, as if she was talking about something that had no relation to her. "I wish to know the other option." Jiang Ji was in fear, his voice even trembling. "Madam Leona, I want to live. Please give me a chance. Tell me all things you saw in the forbidden place related to Shi Yang in details. Of course, you can choose to lie if you think you can deceive me." Leona was nonchalant, as though she didn't care about his killing him. She didn't show her intention of killing him. Her calmness scared her victims out of their wits. Jiang Ji lifted his head up and his body shivered. He didn't hesitate and answered immediately. He is not dead. He's constrained in the forbidden place by the barriers. I took the purgatory token from him, but I didn't harm him. There's a palace inside that forbidden place which has 49 layers of barriers. It should be built by the former imperial masters of the divine nation to conceal an unknowable secret, perhaps. He knew he had only one chance in front of Leona. If he lied, this infamous woman would never give him a bit of her mercy. Thus, Jiang Ji didn't have the nerves to lie. He didn't even dare pause in his narration as he was afraid that she would think that he was taking time to fabricate his story. Leona listened to him silently without interrupting him. Until Jiang Ji finished, she remained in thought. Jiang Ji slightly lifted his head up, looking at her anxiously. He didn't dare make a small move, just waiting for Leona's final decision. He understood how brutal and cruel this woman was. All stories about this woman were related to bloody massacres. He knew her realm, which was enough to erase him easily. No one would ever know he was buried or torn into pieces on this damn planet. Thus, he didn't dare move or talk rashly. He just waited like that. You can go. After a while, Leona waved to dismiss him as though she was waving a fly away. Remember, I've never seen you and you've never seen me here. I will remember your kindness for the rest of my life. Jiang Ji threw his hand into the air and swore. He watched her. Seeing her have no other commotions, he fearfully backed off little by little. As soon as he got out of Leona's dark domain, he ran like crazy and didn't dare stop even just for a second. Leona stood up in the dark. Her dark green eyes shot toward the direction of the purgatory star for a long time. Then, she snorted, "That little brat made me lose a life star. I'll remember this debt." The absolute darkness drifted like a dark cloud into the immense starry area. It flashed, swayed, then went invisible. The emptied mineral star resumed its quietness. The prohibited area, sealed extreme purgatory field, purgatory star. Shi Yang was staying in the middle of rippling water-like barriers, gawking at the grand palace that was almost within his reach. A magical energy fluctuation sent out from a deep place inside that palace. Just like the change of seasons, the palace seemed to continue operating now. Strange and grumbling explosions echoed from the ground under the forbidden land where he was suspended in the air. The same changes also happened in the other forbidden areas. 4/3 sky of King God Realm warriors were also confined in the barriers like Shi Yang. They lifted their heads looking at the palace and feeling the energy waves sending out from inside. The 5 forbidden areas in the extreme purgatory field slowly moved and adjoined with each other in a way no one could ever imagine or have a chance to witness. Although they looked slow, they were actually moving very fast. Within 15 minutes, the 5 forbidden areas situated in 5 different regions of the extreme purgatory field had magically fused into one intact piece. Even the 5 wonderful palaces appeared as one place under some mysterious force. Immediately, Shi Yang saw not only 1 but 5 palaces. The 5 palaces looked like 5 radiantly dazzling massive pieces of a jewel. With the support of the towering stone pillar, they moved up to the sky over their heads. The 5 grand palaces arrayed a pentagon in the air. Like Shi Yang, the other 4 were staying near their palaces and facing the sky with a look of astonishment. The other 4 didn't have Shi Yang's progress. After so many years, they had only broken through 23 layers. Shi Yang was more productive. Ah! The surprised voices of the 4 arose from 4 different corners. They all gazed at Shi Yang. Shi Yang stayed in his barriers and tilted his head, looking at the other 4. A gleam of surprise sparkled in his eyes. The 4 of them were at the 3rd sky of King God Realm, 3 males, and 1 female. The 3 male warriors were all the old man with disheveled hair and dirty clothes. They looked like they hadn't cleaned their bodies for years. All of them looked helter-skelter, their eyes hiding brutal and malevolent intentions. The only woman looked in her 30s. She was beautiful, wearing a snakeskin-like leather robe at knee-length, revealing her jade-like calves. That woman wasn't human. She belonged to the Ghost Mark clan. Delicate cyan tattoos were shown on her exposed white skin arms and legs which gave her a perfectly beautiful look, charming but also evil. In her 30s, she was the flower at its most beautiful blooming time. Subtly, fine azure patterns were drawn on her delicate neck. She had 2 exquisite jade earrings dangling on her earlobes, which created the ding-dang sounds when she moved. Her beautiful eyes were like a deep sea that people could never measure. She eyed Shi Yang from a far distance with a beam in her eyes that signaled how she felt uneasy. Her eyebrows arched as she gave an inaudible snort. When the other 4 were watching him, Shi Yang also observed them. Not long afterward, he looked sterner. Just like Jiang Ji, they were all at the 3rd sky of King God Realm. They were the death-sentenced inmates of the extreme purgatory field. Their hands were soaked in blood. They were not good people. Kid, are you the person Jiang Ji mentioned? You've replaced him? An old man as thin as a bamboo stick that looked like a skeleton with human skin cover asked. His eyes sparkled with gloomy light. Seems like you are much faster than us. What did you do to combine all the forbidden places into one piece? The other 3 observed him, their eyes hiding their ferocious thoughts. Yeah, Jiang Ji trapped me, making me sink in here. Shi Yang frowned before continuing. He left, I guess. Since then I've been breaking these barriers. Until now, I've deactivated 42 barriers. At the moment the last barrier was broken, the palace I saw suddenly changed, which brought us all here. Yeah, I think it's the special effect of the Forbidden Lands. This wasn't my intention. Feng Rao, what do you think? The man who talked to him first pondered before turning to look at the woman who had strange and exquisite drawings on her body. The other 2 old men also looked at the Ghostmark clan woman named Feng Rao. It seemed like she was their leader. Of course, this is good. Feng Rao cracked a strange smile. Light sparkled from her eyes. We 4 have spent a lot of time just to break around 20 layers. Jiang Ji was the worst. He had been holding us back. He left and arranged a good boy who could surpass us in just a short time. Aren't we lucky? Then, the other 3 acted oddly. Those old men didn't look like good people. They burst out laughing bizarrely as if they all agreed with her. We've been patient for a long time just to find what was inside the palaces. This kid accelerated our progress. It is all good for us. Feng Rao smiled. Didn't you see that the barriers are loosening a bit? Of course, we did. The 3 old men cracked strange smiles. Shi Yang's face darkened as he had a bad premonition. These 4 people were too relaxed and nonchalant. If their desire of knowing the secrets of this place was too much, they must have planned something. Chapter 794, A Dark Enchantment. Chapter 794, A Dark Enchantment. These 4 seemed to be different from Jiang Ji. Although Jiang Ji was curious to know the secrets of the palace, he was too far from the level of the other 4. He wouldn't let those secrets keep him here like the others who would never leave until they reached the palaces. Good, very good. With this kid, our progress will be much faster. The skinny man bared his teeth, smiling disgustingly. Then it's all right. Our purpose is to understand the secrets of those palaces. I heard they were built by the 5 former imperial masters of the Dark Firmament Divine Nation. They hide an earth-shaking secret. I haven't gotten out of this place because of it. Feng Rao glared at the other 3. You guys are curious, too, perhaps? The 3 old men nodded simultaneously. Kid, what's your name? Asked Feng Rao. Shi Yang. Okay, Shi Yang, since Jiang Ji transferred his responsibility to you, you shall replace him then. Not bad. Just do what you were doing. Break the rest of the barriers. Feng Rao assigned him this task naturally as if it was obvious. Shi Yang frowned, contemplated for a while and then laughed. He stopped moving inside the barrier. The 3 old men darkened their faces. Why did you laugh? Feng Rao's arched eyebrows rose. Her slender face outlined her bright eyes, which were sparkling with deep and strange light. Aren't you interested in it? Of course, I am. Shi Yang shook his head many times faintly. But I don't want to be dim-sighted. I want to know why you guys want to get in there. You guys aren't like Jiang Ji. Jiang Ji didn't know what was in the palaces. I think you guys know something. Yeah, maybe, you weren't forced to be jailed in the extreme purgatory field. Right. The other four frowned. I think you came to the extreme purgatory field on your own, with the goal to seek these forbidden areas. Am I right? Shi Yang smiled coldly. The other four quieted down. Feng Rao pondered for a while, then probed. Do you know something, too? Shi Yang could feel something here, but he was still calm. Yeah, I'm like you guys. I came here for this special place. I let Jiang Ji trap me here. It was exactly what I wanted. What you know, I also know. Haha. I just want to confirm. Do you have the jade token? It wasn't easy to deceive Feng Rao. She snorted. Each of the five of us has a jade token. Jiang Ji kept one. If you don't have the jade token, how did you know it? I don't have the jade token, Shi Yang shook his head. But the one Jiang Ji had comes from my family. My family had kept it for a long time. After my family has declined, the jade token had been passed through many people before Jiang Ji got it. Jiang Ji has the jade token, but he didn't know the real secret of it. I'm here with the same goal as you guys. Shi Yang had racked his brain to fabricate those lies. He thought it could work. Indeed, Feng Rao's group changed their facial expressions listening to him. They seemed to buy it. No wonder why Jiang Ji wasn't so patient. He doesn't know much. The bony old man had his eyes flared as he nodded discreetly. If we have the same goal, we don't have much time to talk. The secret of those palaces can change the structure of the raging flame star area. People, do your best. Feng Rao also nodded. Kid, our priority is to remove the barriers. Your fast speed helps loosen the barrier in our place too. If we continue this way, we can get in there soon. Wait until we break the barriers outside the palace. Then, we will talk. The other three nodded. Shi Yang pondered for a while. He didn't continue to quarrel with them. He got the conclusion he wanted. Feng Rao's team came to the extreme purgatory field because of the forbidden lands. There was no doubt about it. Their imprisonment in the purgatory star was just their trick. Those four people were at the third sky of King God realm. They were all cruel and malignant. With their abilities, it wasn't too difficult to kill a participant to take the ticket outside. They lingered here for something. A secret that could restructure the raging flame star area. Shi Yang was interested in it all of a sudden. He focused on breaking the left 7 layers. After breaking one layer, he would take a rest and talk with the other 4. Through some conversations, he knew that Feng Rao came from the land of God punishment, the most chaotic place of the entire raging flamestar area. Her status wasn't ordinary. The skeleton-like old man was called Ganji, was a warrior of the 9-star Chamber of Commerce. The other 2 were named Pang Jiao and Han Di. They were from the Underworld League. None of them came from the Dark Firmament Divine Nation, which surprised him. With the same goal, the atmosphere between them seemed to be harmonious without any dispute while the barriers were not yet lifted. As Shi Yang had progressed fast, the breaking speed of the other 4 became faster accordingly. Soon, there was only one barrier in front of Shi Yang. At this moment, Feng Rao said, "We can take a rest." Shi Yang stayed in the water-like barrier and stopped his work. He floated in so many ripples, his face calm. Although he was surprised, he didn't outwardly express it. Wait until they reach the last layer, we will join hands and tear the barrier at the same time to enter the palace. Feng Rao looked at him. Some of the layers in our places still remain. If you break it now, something will change accordingly in our places. At that time, perhaps we can't open the 5 palaces at the same time, and we won't receive anything from it. Ganji, Pang Jiao, and Han Di nodded. Shi Yang didn't know what Feng Rao said was true or not. However, he wouldn't take risks as he didn't know what hid in those palaces. If he broke into there alone, he could possibly encounter something dangerous. Thus, Shi Yang stopped his work, bobbing in the water-like layer. He closed his eyes to comprehend what he had collected during this time of breaking barriers. Shi Yang was studying the subtle mysteries of magical formations that made these barriers. Every magical formation contained different truths of nature. The way to decipher the formation was to follow the trace of its energy using his knowledge of formation and barriers and the soul consciousness to solve it. During this process, Shi Yang gained a deeper perception of other powers in the world. Although he didn't aim to dig his 3 powers Upanishad further, he still got something naturally. Shi Yang stayed quiet and took out the divine crystals to restore his energy. He calmed down his mind to learn the specialties of his powers and didn't bother with the other 3, who were still struggling breaking their barriers. Time flew fast. A long time had passed. Today, Feng Rao was the first one who had reached the final layer. She exhaled and glared at Shi Yang, who was meditating. She didn't say anything but took out the divine crystals to restore her power. A long time afterward, the other 3 also reached the final layer. Their faces brightened up as they were very excited. Just like Shi Yang and Feng Rao, the other 3 didn't hasten to break the final layer. They quietly used the divine crystals to recover their powers to the peak. Shi Yang had restored his powers. He observed them discreetly. His face gradually darkened. He saw their cautiousness. It was obvious that they were so excited, but they all controlled and recovered their powers to the peak. Their intentions were clear to Shi Yang. They all knew they had to use all of the forces in the next moment. Perhaps, after they had broken the final layer, the harmonious relationship between them would be demolished forever without any chance to cooperate again. He understood that once all the barriers were broken, entering the palaces would trigger the big fight against these people. Since he had only the first sky of King God Realm cultivation base, among the 5 of them, he was the weakest. Shi Yang knitted his brows tightly. Although Ganji, Pang Jiao, and Han Di are all at the 3rd sky of King God Realm, Han Di's the weakest. His time in the King God Realm wasn't for too long. Suddenly, a wisp of soul consciousness that was hard to detect sneaked through the broken layers to Shi Yang from Feng Rao's. The eccentric ghost Mark clan woman stooped and opened her eyes to look at him. At this moment, Ganji, Pang Jiao, and Han Di were still restoring their power. They seemed not to recognize Feng Rao's move. You shouldn't reply with soul consciousness. Your realm's low. If you release your soul energy, they can sense you immediately. Feng Rao's thought continued to reach him. You just need to listen to me. At the moment the barriers shatter altogether when we enter the palace, we will have an unavoidable battle. Since your realm's the lowest, I don't know how you got in there, but when we engage in a battle, you will inevitably die first. I have a suggestion. Once we get in there, the other 3 will launch attacks immediately. We will join hands. You'll help me to hold Han Di back for a while. You don't need to join the battle. Just stay outside. You shouldn't hurry because of the things in the palace. Even though Han Di's the weakest among us, he is not someone you can deal with easily. When I say hold him back, deal with him with a tool which you can pour your energy into that I will give you. You don't need to bother with Ganji and Pang Jiao. If I win something, I won't forget your part. If you agree, you should give me a slight nod. Shi Yang squinted, observing her for a long time. Then he slightly nodded. Feng Rao parted her lips, forming a smile. Her eyes glistened. Next, she told him how to use the tool. Among these 4 people, Feng Rao seemed to have the most exquisite cultivation base. Her understanding of powers Upanishad was the most profound. That's why she didn't worry that the other 3 could hear her soul thoughts sending to Shi Yang. Phew! Genji exhaled foul air. The divine crystal in his hand turned into dust and scattered. The old man now looked refreshed and sound. He glared at Feng Rao next to him. Suddenly, he stooped and smiled, his smile worth studying. He looked at Feng Rao then sneaked at Shi Yang. A gleam of disdain flashed in his eyes. Apparently, he didn't consider Shi Yang his equal opponent. Shortly, Pang Jiao and Han Di woke up. When they looked at Feng Rao, they seemed to be afraid of her. However, when they shifted their looks to Shi Yang, their fear disappeared. Obviously, just like Ganji, they deemed Shi Yang nothing of a threat. Let's go. Feng Rao shouted. Shi Yang stooped, placing his hands on the ultimate layer of the barrier. The other 4 also worked on their last barrier breaking. Chapter 795, Small Character, Big Effect. Chapter 795, Small Character, Big Effect. Shi Yang extended his hands, touching the barrier which had a wooden texture. Those magical wood textures connected each other. They were green-brown that looked more like a thick forest. An aura of floras diffused from this barrier. Closing his eyes, Shi Yang felt like he was walking deep into a luxurious forest. He could even smell the fresh smell of green trees and grass. He could feel the breath of nature. Countless wooden pieces fused with each other, creating a sea of lush plants. The essence qi of wood permeated everywhere thickly and vigorously. At the same time, the other four placed their hands on the barrier. From Feng Areo's direction, gold light emitted while red flame, white steam, and yellow earth qi gushed out from Ganji, Pangjiu, and Han Di's areas respectively. 5 elements forces. At first glance, Shi Yang understood that this ultimate layer hid the mysteries of 5 elements. They seemed to connect with each other, too. The barriers of 5 elements, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, could always fuse with each other magically. These last barriers interlinked between the palaces. They kept the subtle powers of balanced 5 elements. Once they broke this balance, something beyond their imagination would happen. Shi Yang observed the wood texture for a while, but he didn't hasten. He closed his eyes and quieted his mind to feel the magical vitality of the wood texture. Shortly, a thought arose in his head. His mind flickered. The dead Upanishad was activated. The soul burial ground diffused, expanding next to him. It engulfed the luxurious forest created by those wood pieces. Wood energy emitted from those magical wood textures. Under the effects of the soul burial ground, this wood energy was absorbed gradually. The vigorous vitality was collected and gathered by Shi Yang. His god body suddenly received the lively power which boosted his power. The subtle power of 5 elements turned into beams of pure energy entering his flesh and bones. This last barrier of wood power was dissolved easily under his special power Upanishad. At this speed, this last barrier would soon vanish. However, Feng Areo's group of 4 found themselves struggling. While they were breaking the barriers, their faces were grim. Sweat beaded their foreheads. They were focusing wholeheartedly, not daring to be distracted. The power in their god bodies was draining fast. Shi Yang could solve his barrier easily, but it was troublesome for them. They were urging their energy madly. Light sparkled from time to time from their bodies as they poured energy into the barriers. They closed their eyes to sense the leaks of the barriers which they would fill with their energy. Those people didn't cultivate any power of the 5 elements. Shi Yang couldn't guess it before they had released their god domain. However, he understood that their powers were almighty and ruthless. As long as they were persistent, when they wore out the energy of the barrier, they would finish it. While he was observing Feng Areo's group, his marvelous soul burial ground had absorbed almost all the wood energy of the last barrier. Seeing the last layer was about to be broken, Shi Yang suddenly stopped his activity. His god domain disappeared. He relaxed and watched the other 4. Shi Yang didn't hasten to tear the last layer of barriers. He didn't know what was in the 5 places or the dangers hiding in there. Thus, he didn't want to be the first one jump in there. As Feng Areo had reminded him, he stayed outside to see what would happen before he could decide his next moves. Shortly, Feng Areo's group had worn out the energy of the final barriers and broken them. Crack crack. Clear echoes arose from the other 4's areas. Light dots of 4 colors scattered. For shadows dashed like meteors under beams of red light. They stormed towards the 5 palaces. Ganji was the fastest. He just swayed and appeared in a palace. Pangjiu and Han Di followed him closely. Feng Areo, the one people feared a lot, came last. While the other 3 dashed into the palace, Feng Areo paused, glaring at Shi Yang. Abruptly, an azure ball covered in lightning was shot toward Shi Yang. Shi Yang was bewildered. He immediately tore off the last barrier. He urged essence qi on his palm and condensed them into fine beams like snakes. He caught the azure ball. This ball was small enough for him to hold it with one hand. However, it was much heavier than it looked. The ball was covered with some strange spikes. At first glance, it looked like a hedgehog curling its body with immense lightning on its spikes. After he had caught the ball, lightning power like ropes condensed and wound around his arm. Azure lightning strikes and his essence chi fused. As Shi Yang's soul consciousness flickered like Feng Rao had told him, he used a strange technique to connect with an area inside that ball. Shortly, he had formed a connection with that small ball. Now he could control the ball. Just like driving the amethyst war chariot, he could manipulate the ball easily. Lightning strikes mixed with his essence chi, which helped him control the lightning power. Feng Rao threw him this toy to deal with Han Di. According to Feng Rao, Shi Yang could use the lightning power in this thunderbolt ball to subdue Han Di. It could even disrupt Han Di's god domain. Holding the thunderbolt ball in his hand, Shi Yang didn't hasten to leave or bother fighting Ganji, Pang Jiao, and Han Di, which was taking place in the palace, just looking at Feng Rao from a distance. Feng Rao nodded to him. She said nothing afterward. Her figure faded immediately. In the next moment, she appeared near Ganji, Pang Jiao, and Han Di. As soon as she appeared, she instantly attacked Ganji. The god domain of these four emerged in one palace. At this moment, Shi Yang finally knew which powers Upanishad each of them cultivated. Ganji's power was gravity. In his affected area, blocks of stone that built up the palace were shaken as if they were about to collapse. In his divine gravitational field, the gravity was increased several hundred times. Besides him, no one could be free of this special effect. Pang Jiao's power Upanishad could make his body stretch or contract at will. When he performed his god domain, his fingers could extend or shorten easily like a monster. His bones would be like the spiral spring that could be lengthened 10 times. This was one of the rarest power Upanishad that Shi Yang had ever seen. Han Di's power Upanishad was soul-dragging. Inside his god domain, shadows of ghosts and demons moved back and forth. He could control them all. Anyone entered Han Di's god domain would have his soul bound and be unable to control his body. Now Shi Yang knew why Feng Rao had given him the thunderbolt ball. Han Di's power could control ghosts and souls, which got scared witless from thunder and lightning. Thus, thunderbolts were the nemesis of his domain. The god domains of Ganji, Pang Jiao, and Han Di were somehow odd. However, the oddest was Feng Rao's domain. Feng Rao's power Upanishad was sound. When her god domain was created, countless sadly grating and shrill voices reverberated. She shouted and her essence chi was poured into her god domain, creating more sharp noises that sounded like brutal blades. When Pang Jiao or Han Di shot their energies into her strange domain, under her techniques and spells, their powers would be locked or burst off. They couldn't damage her. Shi Yang didn't know the real origin of those four, but he was sure they have peculiar god domains. They were attacking each other in the palace as if they had seen a marvelous treasure in there. No one noticed Shi Yang. Perhaps in their minds, Shi Yang was just a small character with only the first sky of King God Realm cultivation base. He wouldn't be able to affect and change the situation of their battle. They decided to ignore him. Feng Rao had used a strange sound technique to subdue the other three. She shrilled. The ear-piercing voice and her energy became invisible spears crossing the space, aiming at Ganji, Pang Jiao, and Han Di. Only Han Di's peculiar power Upanishad could trouble her. Since Han Di could use the magical power of Soul Upanishad, he could make countless ghosts and evils came forth to create shields from the sharp sound spears. He didn't struggle much. Sound has no weight. That's why Ganji's gravity power couldn't affect it. Those sound spears then wreaked havoc in his god domain. Ganji felt that his hands were tied, he couldn't do anything. Pang Jiao didn't have any solution. Even if he could make his hands longer, when the sound attacked him, he had to shrink his limbs instantly, resizing his god body 10 times smaller. Shi Yang. All of a sudden, Feng Rao shouted while fighting 1-on-3. Shi Yang got out of the barrier and walked to the palace. Hearing her call, he hesitated for a while before flinging the thunderbolt ball. Hundreds of azure lightning strikes moved like the electric eels toward Han Di's god domain. His god domain felt each of blue lightning strike, and it burned many ghosts in there. Immense azure mist fumed. Han Di's god domain was shattered under the coverage of the blue lightning. It couldn't perform at its best. Kid, you wish for death. Han Di was enraged. As he hadn't prepared to counterattack, his god domain was disrupted. Feng Rao's maledictions had shot him badly. His god body now had many bleeding holes. He was outraged, looking at Shi Yang with a flame of anger in his eyes. His god domain was damaged, making Feng Rao's power fiercer. Ganji and Pang Jiao were completely subdued. They had no solution to wiggle. Feng Rao was excited. While dealing with the other two, she distracted them for a while and went quickly towards an area inside the palace. A rainbow-like bunch of light like a ribbon shot out from her soft palm that flew directly to that area. A fragment that looked like a turtle shell was shielded by a magical formation placed in that area. Feng Rao's rainbow was shot there, smashing the formation. The fragment that looked like a turtle shell was about to fall into her hand. Shortly, a tremor was sent from the 5 palaces. From the other formations in the other 4 palaces, pieces of turtle shell flew out and gathered as if they were about to join and create something complete and extraordinary. Chapter 796, Hiding Incompetence by Keeping Quiet. Chapter 796, Hiding Incompetence by Keeping Quiet. The 5 pieces of turtle shell used to be split up, but now they were reunited, becoming one intact piece under some force. By the time the 5 pieces of turtle shell combined, a magical energy fluctuation bloomed fiercely from that shell. Feng Rao discolored as if she could feel something terrible. She didn't say anything but flew away in just a blink. Her figure swayed and she had gone very far away from that turtle shell. Right at that moment, tens of thousands of 7-colored lights shot out from the shell, each of which was sharp enough to pierce through anything. The rays of light were denser near the turtle shell. They shot out everywhere and became more scattering. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Tens of thousands of rays shot out altogether. Han Di wasn't so cautious. More than 10 beams of light pierced him. His god body revealed some spatial holes. Shortly after, Han Di's god body was finished. Even his soul altar was pierced and exploded shortly. Ganji and Pang Jiao could notice the danger. They flew away after Feng Rao. However, they couldn't dodge all the rays. Some lights had managed to prick their arms and waist that looked like the wounds caused by invisible swords. They were lucky that those lights didn't hit their weak points. Unlike poor Han Di, they were still alive. They hastened to use pellets to stop the wounds from bleeding and grow flesh to seal the holes. Their intestines stayed in their tummy. The unharmed were Feng Rao, who fled first, and Shi Yang, who was standing the furthest from the source of attacks. Shi Yang was frightened since there was a scattering beam shot right next to him. Too close. If he hadn't listened to Feng Rao and went inside, he would have possibly gotten hit. The closer it was to the turtle shell, the thicker the beams of light were. They condensed and then expanded. The gaps between the beams enlarged when they shot out. Shi Yang and Feng Rao had swayed between those gaps to dodge the fatal attacks. Tens of thousands of light beams bombarded thickly from the turtle shell before ceasing. In just a blink, condensed light covered the turtle shell while it was spinning in the area of the clear energy formation. Ganji and Pang Jiao simply cured their wounds and gazed at Feng Rao with rage and hatred. Bitch! Well done. These two had moved to stay in the gaps between the light beams. They didn't get hurt but they were pale. Apparently, they got hurt severely. You and I are the same. If you haven't hastened to attack me, we wouldn't have caused the reunion of the 5 pieces of the turtle shell. Everything wouldn't have turned this way. I can only say that you deserve it. Feng Rao beamed a faint smile, not showing that she was weaker. Well, if we haven't hindered you, would you have taken all the good things? Wouldn't that be ideal for you, eh? If you were a nice person, why wouldn't you spare some good things for us? Ganji was outraged. His eyes were cold and sinister as he was angry. Pang Jiao sneered looking at Feng Rao before glaring at Shi Yang. Bitch, you're good at calculating. You decided to cooperate with that kid and made him hold back Han Di, which made his god domain ineffective. You're so cunning and malignant. Well, The three of you have soon planned to fake your first fight and wait until I got into your trap. You wanted to kill me, the strongest first. Did you think that I wouldn't know your scheme? Feng Rao arched her brows and snorted. You can plan to attack me, but I'm not allowed to counterattack. Shi Yang was surprised listening to their conversation. He felt grim. None of them were nice. All had bad intentions. Ganji, Pang Jiao, and Han Di all knew that Feng Rao was the toughest to deal with. They had a perfect plan that they would pretend to fight against each other to entice Feng Rao. The three of them would join hands and kill Feng Rao first. Then, they would check out the treasures of this place. Anyway, Feng Rao had predicted their scheme. She wasn't fooled, so she decided to join hands with Shi Yang to hold back Han Di, preventing him from utilizing his energy to the utmost. She was afraid of Han Di's power the most. Thus, the cunning plan of Ganji, Pang Jiao, and Han Di was ineffective. Feng Rao, in an opposite situation, had gained the upper hand and suppressed Ganji and Pang Jiao. She almost got the piece of turtle shell first. Unfortunately, man proposes but God disposes. Even Feng Rao had a wrong calculation. The 5 pieces had reunited fast, leaving her no time to dodge the danger. Her plan failed. They're all old cunning foxes, indeed. Shi Yang became more cautious. While they were talking, he silently swayed between the gaps of the light beams to the position nearest to Han Di's shattered body to absorb his thick essence chi. No one noticed this move of his. Han Di was at the 3rd sky of King God realm. Even though he was dead, the energy he had accumulated for so many years wouldn't vanish so quickly. When Shi Yang came, the unowned essence chi beams seemed to find a new host. They discreetly congregated in his body. The whole life essence chi of a King God realm warrior was massive. Shi Yang hated that Feng Rao, Ganji, and Pang Jiao couldn't quarrel longer so that he would have time to harvest this marvelous energy. The 5 pieces of turtle shell have united. You know what to do now. Ganji gritted his teeth, looking at Feng Rao indignantly. It was a good business, but you guys have messed everything up. And now no one will get anything from this. You blame me? Feng Rao made a cold expression. Why do you blame me? Didn't you want to kill me and steal the treasures? All of you are no good. No one has the right to blame the other. After that, Ganji and Pang Jiao quieted down. I have no idea what to do since the 5 pieces have united. Alright, if you have any good solutions to get through those fatal beams to be close to the turtle shell, you can try. You can be sure that I won't attack you at this moment. Feng Rao pondered for a while. She was a little bit upset, though. She looked at the turtle shell while she wiped a flock of her long hair. Shi Yang was standing 50 meters away from Han Di's body, frowning and looking at that area. The 5 pieces of turtle shell were adjoined perfectly with each other. Halos supported the shell, lifted it up and spun it. Immense magical energy shot out unceasingly from it. No one wished to come close and touch it. Ganji and Pang Jiao looked at the turtle shell greedily. Their eyes couldn't conceal their dark desire. However, although Feng Rao had said that, they didn't have any solution besides to stare and think. Feng Rao didn't answer. She hesitated for a while before moving towards Shi Yang. Feeling Feng Rao coming close to him, Shi Yang slightly knitted his brows. He accumulated his energy and put up his guard cautiously. Give it back to me. Han Di's dead. You don't need it anymore. As she could feel Shi Yang's vigilance, Feng Rao stopped walking, looking at him from a far distance. She beamed a faint smile and extended her jade-like arm. The exquisite azure tattoos seemed to be moving on her arm. Ganji and Pang Jiao suddenly looked at Shi Yang. Being astounded for a while, Ganji laughed evilly. Shi Yang, the Thunderbolt Ball is a rank 2 divine grade treasure. The lightning and thunder power of this ball is very dense and dangerous. It feels very good to use it and is very effective. You're experienced, I suppose? Do you really want to give it back to her? If I were you when I receive something, I would never return it, honestly. Pang Jiao also laughed bizarrely. It's a rank 2 divine grade treasure. Very useful to enhance your power. You have the lowest realm among us. With that treasure, you will have more support. If you give it back to her, will you be any different from a fool? She used you. She should pay you, right? Ganji and Pang Jiao took turns to give advice to Shi Yang as they wanted to separate him and the woman. Feng Rao didn't say anything. She just beamed a faint smile and looked at him as if she was waiting for his decision. Shi Yang also smiled, enjoying the thunderbolt ball in his hand. His smile became brighter. He had done something with that thunderbolt ball. He looked at Feng Rao and said nothing. You like it? Feng Rao parted her lips and smiled. Her eyebrows like the new moon arched slightly. If you like it, I can give it to you. However, I need it to do something. After that, I will give it to you. Okay. A gentleman won't take what the other likes. Keep your thunderbolt ball. Shi Yang chuckled and flicked his fingers. The thunderbolt ball flew out, turning into a blue lightning strike that fell into Feng Rao's hand. Fool. Stupid. Ganji and Pang Jiao snorted, their faces malevolent. His smart, Feng Rao retrieved her thunderbolt ball. A bright smile appeared on her face. She glared at Ganji and Pang Jiao then said, You are the stupid ones. You think your plan is good. Look what you've done now. Ganji and Pang Jiao grimaced even more. Shi Yang looked at Feng Rao seriously. When he saw that the woman didn't check the ball and instead put it into her fantasy sky ring right away, he beamed a sinister smile. Shi Yang understood well that Feng Rao, Ganji, and Pang Jiao were the same. She didn't care about him either. Otherwise, Feng Rao wouldn't have given him the thunderbolt ball to aid him in dealing with Han Di. She thought that Shi Yang's real abilities couldn't harm Han Di without the ball. And it was also the reason why Feng Rao had never thought that he could do something to her thunderbolt ball, which made her not check it. It was an instinctive disdain. A warrior at the third sky of King God Realm would naturally not put a warrior 2 skies lower than him in his eyes. It wasn't that they weren't careful, they just didn't know how morbidly formidable Shi Yang was. The other 3 considered each other the strongest enemies. And Shi Yang, in their eyes, was just a foolish kid who knew nothing and couldn't influence this battle. To their disdain, Shi Yang wasn't angry. Quite the contrary, he felt happy. If someone doesn't know your real strength, he will ignore you, which troubles him much later in the battle with you. Shi Yang accumulated his energy quietly, his visage relaxed. He calmly prepared everything carefully. He wanted to see what these 3 could do after all. Chapter 797, Undying Wood. Chapter 797, Undying Wood. Rainbow light shot out everywhere from the center of the combined 5 forbidden areas. Gaps between those beams were visible. Feng Rao, Ganji, and Pang Jiao stayed hidden in the gaps, looking at the turtle shell with a grim countenance. They started to use their energy to pull it. However, Feng Rao's sound power and Ganji's Pang Jiao's special powers were all useless. Pang Jiao shrank his body 10 times. He became just 1/10 of the size of a normal adult. He swayed between the beams to go closer to the shell. Then, he extended his index finger, resizing it to be as small as a needle to inch towards and touch the turtle shell. Unfortunately, when his needle-like index finger approached the hard shell, a strange energy wave shot out. The ceasing light started to change. A rainbow light shot out like a ribbon, piercing through his index finger. Pang Jiao retreated rapidly. His body was now even smaller than a dwarf. He couldn't help but shiver. When his index finger resumed its normal size, it was broken and bleeding. Pang Jiao was frightened. He didn't dare try anymore, retreating to a place far away and using medicine to apply to his wound. His eyes had a look of distress. His power was considered to have many advantages among the 3 of them. However, no matter how careful he was, he still got injured. This frightened him a lot. He didn't dare act rashly anymore. Ganji and Feng Rao thought of no solutions. Their eyes glued to that strange shell, unable to conceal the desires in their heart. Anyway, they had no solution for this headache-given matter. Shi Yang was still musing. He looked like he wasn't planning to take any action besides simply glaring at that shell. He didn't know what it was, but he knew for sure that the halo twirling around that hard shell could pierce through any kind of matter. Even if he got his god body at its greatest peak, he didn't dare try. After a while, they had made no progress. Feng Rao, Ganji, and Pang Jiao frowned, raked through their fantasy sky rings, and criticizing each other. Their words became more malignant and sinister. They seemed like they would burst out fighting each other any time soon. The exquisite azure drawings on Feng Rao's smooth, white skin started to move when she was enraged, giving her a bizarre beauty. Although Shi Yang was busy, he looked nonchalant. He eyed the woman, Ganji, and Pang Jiao without haste. Compared to the other three, he looked more like an onlooker, someone who didn't care about what the results would be. I wonder if the jade token works, Feng Rao pondered for a while. She seemed to have something in her mind. She rose her hand, then grabbed something. The cube stone on Han Di's body flew up immediately, falling precisely into her jade palm, combining with the one she had. Ganji and Pang Jiao got it. They frowned and threw her their square stones with a dark face. Shi Yang watched and found that their 4 square stones were exactly the same as Jiang Ji's stone. They seemed to make a key. The 4 stones combined to reveal the shape of a key. Feng Rao's group had their eyes brighten up as if they had finally found a solution they had never thought possible. They became excited looking at Shi Yang and shouting in unison. "Where's yours?" "Ah." Shi Yang couldn't help but beam a forced smile. He shook his head under their intense looks, showed them his hands and shrugged. "I'm sorry. I don't have it." "Jiang Ji didn't give you the stone?" Feng Rao's beautiful eyes sparkled brutally. She was enraged. She thought that they could solve it finally, but now the problem was Shi Yang. Ganji and Pang Jiao darkened their faces. The murderous intent in their eyes was obvious. 3 different auras slithered like invisible toxic snakes surrounding Shi Yang. If he made a wrong move, they would kill him instantly. Shi Yang was stern inwardly. He couldn't hold his snort. He was staying the furthest from the source of the rainbow light. Shi Yang moved quickly to the gap nearest to him. He gathered his energy to prepare for a battle with the rage of the other 3. Feng Rao, Ganji, and Pang Jiao had laid all of their hopes on the cube stones. Now they had 4 stones connected to each other and formed the shape of a key. It just needed one more piece to complete this key, which seemed to be able to open the way to that hard shell. The only exit was erased by Shi Yang's words. Of course, they were enraged. Their looks with the brutal intentions as thick as black ink were aimed at Shi Yang coldly. Shi Yang's god soul suddenly got extremely agitated. He continually urged space power in his sea of consciousness. Flows of soul consciousness with space energy twirled around his sea of consciousness and covered his soul altar. The surging agitation gradually vanished. The soul confinement that the other 3 planted on his soul was ineffective. A strange light sparkled in Feng Rao's exquisite and eccentric face. Her eyes blinked as she stooped and sighed. "Not bad. You can dodge our soul confinement. No wonder why you aren't afraid at all. Seems like we've underestimated you. I don't have it, really. Even if you kill me, it's no use." Shi Yang smiled miserably. "What about getting out there and bringing Jiang Ji back here? F*ck it. Do you think we have so much time? Do you think you can get out of the extreme purgatory field that easy?" Pang Jiao couldn't help but scold loudly. "Shi Yang, that is the undying wood. It is not the turtle shell like you thought." Shortly, a soul popped up in his sea of consciousness. The vermilion bird True Flame was talking to him. "I have the vermilion bird's knowledge. The undying wood's really marvelous. It's the top treasure of the wood class in the 5 elements. It's tougher than the toughest metal. There's no sharp weapon that could cut it." Undying wood. Shi Yang was cautious discreetly. He was moved. Besides its hardness, what are its other characteristics? Strange treasure undying wood of the wood class has the magical but natural wooden texture. With this magical texture, the blacksmith with supernatural power could portray the formations according to that wood texture to create the most unimaginable and subtle abilities. "Can I approach it? Didn't you take in a large amount of wood essence chi in the last barrier you've just broken? Use that essence chi to cover your entire body and try, the vermilion bird true flame told him. My information comes from the vermilion bird before he left the Grace mainland. We don't have deeper knowledge about the undying wood yet, so it is not clear enough. I heard that the undying wood comes from a divine tree after it became rotten. But this piece isn't rotten, so it's called undying wood. Extremely strange, right? The undying wood comes from a rotten divine tree. The tree was rotten but its wood wasn't rotten. What kind of logic was that? Shi Yang was surprised. He listened to the heaven flame attentively. He suddenly had a strange feeling that the creation of the undying wood contained some truth of nature. The wood texture barrier you've broken simulates the natural texture of the undying wood. Since you've got it magically, can you condense it and use it to cover your body entirely? At least, you can cover one arm of yours to touch it, continued the vermilion bird true flame. Shi Yang was astounded for a while. He instinctively tried as he was told. He urged and drew the wood essence chi from his flesh and bone, trying to pour it into one arm. His arm became brown and grey just like a dried tree trunk. It looked a bit strange to him. At this moment, the sinister looks of Feng Rao, Pang Jiao, and Ganji still gazed at Shi Yang tightly. The murderous intent was so heavy that it could burst in any minute. Don't act rashly, you guys, Shi Yang suddenly shouted, his face solemn. Wait a minute and give me time to try. I'm a blacksmith. I have knowledge of formations and barriers. This is why I was able to break the barriers faster than you guys. Yeah, it's the barrier that creates those fatal light beams. Let me try. Feng Rao's group halted, their faces astounded. They knew something was happening in that central area, so they knew it wasn't the barrier like Shi Yang had said. They doubted his words. However, they were shaken upon hearing that Shi Yang wanted to try. They thought that in the worst case, Shi Yang would be crushed into pieces in that source of light. In that case, they didn't need to do anything to erase him, and they could even have a chance to observe the bursting energy of that fatal source. The three agreed tacitly. They stopped gathering energy and just gave a snort while watching Shi Yang move. Keep your eye on the three for me. A thought was sent and the heaven flames started to fly around his soul altar. They accumulated energy and waited for a chance. More wood essence chi was urged out of his body and created a layer covering him entirely. Shortly, he became a shriveled tree log, his entire body brown and grey like a rotten tree. In this special form, he carefully touched the light beams next to him. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Contact between the light and his finger created strange sounds. The sharp light seemed to be softened magically. The tremendous piercing power vanished. Shi Yang was excited. A bright smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Ganji, Feng Rao, and Pang Jiao noticed his moves. Divine light sparkled gloriously in their eyes as they gawked disbelievingly. Shi Yang laughed contentedly while shooting like a brown light towards the undying wood. He didn't bother with the scorching looks of the other three burning his back. Beams of light shining on his body were all softened. When the steam arose on all over his body, Shi Yang descended right over the undying wood. He didn't say anything but grabbed it fiercely. Tens of thousands of rainbow beams disappeared into the undying wood at the moment his fingers touched the piece of wood. The undying wood became simple and natural, but it was as heavy as a mountain. The subtle, exquisite wood texture of this piece looked like a strange but magical star map. Pang Jiao, Ganji, and Feng Rao's eyes reddened instantly. They didn't say anything but released their god domains, dashing toward Shi Yang at their max speed. 3 waves of formidable energy swept over like 3 meteors shooting across the sky with an imposing momentum. Rumble, 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 rumble. Shattering and collapsing sounds echoed from the 5 palaces. The earth cracked. The mountain shook and collapsed. The barrier covering this area was torn apart. Immense grey mist flooded into the place furiously. The strange magnetic field of the extreme purgatory field vanished into thin air. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.